At times compared to legendary tracks such as Rhymes, Longford deserves its fearsome reputation. Tackling it in Formula 2 machinery will be no mean feat, so get ready for the Longford Memorial Hall 2025 Sim Racing event. You'll see it all live here on Genesis Extreme. Hi, I'm Joe Peak, and with me in the booth is Jake Sperry. Behind the scenes, our director Daniel Costello and Christian Duploy assisting. Jake, there's so much history here, and it's no wonder Tasmania has this wonderful facility to celebrate it.
Look, this is a wonderful track. It was out there and has hosted 2 Australian Grand Prix in its time, a circuit that is ready, built and tailor-made, which put Tasmania on the map when it came to Australian racing. This, a circuit which, when you put it down on paper, is one that actually has a lot of nuance to it. The early start of the lap going through the viaducts is one of the toughest corners out there on the circuit. But when you look around this corners, or the corners that you've got and the laps that you've got, it is one of the more unique circuits out there because you've got so much that you can go and battle with. That flying mile is a long, great place at the end of the lap to make overtaking opportunities happen. And then there's the small fact of just after Longford Corner that you have to navigate over the top of the railway before reaching Tannery Corner. I think it's a very unique circuit. It is designed for the time, and one of the reasons why the 7.2 kilometer, 4.5 mile circuit here is still one of the great classics out there that we see racing with HRSC.
We've seen them run this a lot, and no wonder it is quite a test of the drivers. Now, for the schedule for today, going to be a bit interesting, but nothing too complicated. We're in practice right now, and they will have qualifying here in just a moment. Those won't be races. Those will just be regular qualifying sessions. They'll have a quick sprint race for race 1. We'll invert the top 10 for that, and then race 2 will be a longer 28-lap feature race. So hopefully we'll get to chat to some drivers afterwards, but as we hover above the wonderful Esk River, we're going to be crossing that a lot today. That is for sure. Definitely one of the more defining features of this track, the fact that it goes over 2 bridges over the course of it, Jake.
Yeah, and those 2 bridges have 2 very different ideals to it. Of course, running through the middle sector of the lap and trying to navigate through the long bridge section, you are looking at just dancing a car on a tightrope, essentially, before you reach Newry Corner, back over the top of the hill and trying to navigate down for the flying mile. But when you come over the King's Bridge, it's about giving yourself room. You get the track very much squeezed together by the viaduct jumping under the bridge, and then once you exit, it's about going full bore on the power over the King's Bridge because you're trying to set up for Longford Corner. And of course, when we're running here in these Formula 2 style vehicles, we're running with a little bit of modification to it, of course, because we're trying to replicate the cars of the times in that sort of scenario. So it's not just that we're running with one engine, we've got a car with a little bit more modified power and weight distribution to go and replicate what we've seen with other vehicles of the time.
Exactly. These are Formula 2 spec machines, but like you said, adapted a little bit to mimic the Tasman series, which ran Formula 2 cars at the time. So should be interesting, and I'm sure those who are listening and aren't aware of this era thinking, okay, Formula 2 shouldn't be that impressive because Formula 1 would be the top. Well, let me tell you, these are light little cars. There is a lot of power for how little weight they have underneath them. And as you can see, this is not a modern track with a lot of runoff to it. So they're going to be a right handful for our drivers. This will be truly a test for the brave as we're heading off into the qualifying session now. Everybody going to try and get themselves a little bit of room to set up. And you can just see how difficult it is to get the power down with these cold tires, Jake. Already cars squirming to get them pointed straight.
Well, the issue they have off the start is that they basically just all had to leave the coupe. They had to basically leave the equivalent of a farmer's field to go and get out onto circuit and not drive through the pit lane that they had. So they did have to drive through the pits, but ultimately not through the boxes themselves. So they had the opportunity to go out there and really push. Oskari Kantonen then out then on circuit. They've only got the 10 minutes set of time, so I don't think they're going to get too long by comparison. But for those who don't understand the Tasman Formula Series, I think it's really important to give a little bit of credit to it. Of course, the Tasman Formula was created in 1964 and was very much one of the highest caliber series out there in terms of what drivers were champion from it. So Bruce McLaren in 64, Jim Clark 65, 67 and 68, Jackie Stewart in 66, and then Chris Amon in 69 and Graham Lawrence in 1970. That then morphed into the Formula 5000 series, which brought itself through, still had drivers like Peter Gethin, for example, winning that championship up till 1975 when it ceased to happen. But there have been a couple more championships that fall into that same sort of bracket and category. Formula Holden in the late 90s, early 2000s, and then the mix of the last 5 championships out there over the last 5 years of S5000, which has now become Formula Regional Oceania, very similar to the likes of the FRECA Championship of Formula Regional Europe.
For those from the rest of the world probably thinking, well, I mean, Tasmanian-based series, that sounds kind of remote, so why would that draw in so many big names? You have to remember, it's on the other hemisphere. So when most of the northern hemisphere is experiencing their winter, a lot of them can hop down so that they don't get rusty during the off season, go and compete. And well, when you're a racing driver and you make your living, you got to try and stay busy as long as you can. So that's why you tended to see some really big names jump on down and show themselves. And I think we're all the better for it, getting so many great competitors and legendary faces coming and trying to ply their trade here. Is Dennis Duna coming up and around Newry Corner. Definitely one of the more unique turns on this track and discovering just how tricky it is into the braking zone.
Yeah, it's up the hill, and you're always trying to find where's the right place to go, because you've got that left and right just before you reach the corner, and you've got to find a place to brake as you hit that section. So you are dancing about, trying to make sure that you are straight lining as much as you can, not running too far over to the left, not being too far over to the right, and still able to carry the speed over through the middle as you charge. So for Dennis Duna, that was very difficult, because trying to carry that speed and momentum just ran it a little bit too wide and was up over the verge there on the left-hand side, which wasn't great. Big long braking zone, try and get around the tree at the final corner out there on circuit. That one being rather important to get right at Mountford, and then back over the line to go and start a flying lap. That's going to be what you're going to be keeping in mind right at the end of those laps. But just to go back, I believe, to a little bit of what you were touching upon earlier there, Joe, that these circuits and these drivers having to keep themselves race ready, it does pay dividends. And why you see such high-speed drivers, we see one right off there heading down in towards turn number 2. I think that was Hermans who found himself off there in the 58. The big key, I think, for the old school Formula racers that are out there that were looking to pilot about was the key that you only had about a 9-race championship back in the day. So if you've only got 9 races to go and keep yourself and driving forward to say you're the best driver in the world with the Formula 1 schedule, then obviously drivers are going to do F2 and they're going to try and get as much races under their belt as possible. It's not like today where all these drivers are contracted for F1 and F1 only and make multi-millions of dollars and pounds and all the rest of it to go and say, well, we only need to do 25 races a year.
Exactly. Like you said, only 9 rounds. You got plenty of open weekends. You got to get out there and be driving if you want to make money. And thankfully here in the sim world, not as much of a concern. This is pretty much all just for fun out here and not really as much money on the line. So, you know, it's all for the love of it. And these drivers certainly do love racing with these old vintage cars. This is down into Mountford Corner. I feel like this is going to be one of those critical corners in the races today, Jake, because the last time that we've had the HRSC race here, it almost always seems to catch a few people out. It's such a long braking zone down, and it's such a slow corner.
Well, the reason why it's so difficult is because you've got the flying mile before it. You've got such a long back stretch, which gives that opportunity then for you to just try and fall out of rhythm as you go through. The tyres start to cool off. The brakes start to cool as well. Over the South Esk River, we see Nico Hillebrand looking to make the Springall Rennsport car make its progress through for qualifying. But it has such this large braking zone. after such a long straight as you go through, and you just take this understanding of you are full flat throttle pretty much from the exit of Newry Corner. You're now looking to try and find what is your marker post to go and find your braking point. And if you choose the wrong telegraph pole, you're going to be straight on, and you're looking at every bump in the road and every single piece out there that gives you the chance to go and slow it down. But also you're looking at it, those brakes aren't going to be running as effective as they have been at other stages of the lap. For example, up into Newry Corner, because you had just had Tannery Corner before it. So you're really looking to dive on the brakes, get the right turn in as you go through, and because it's such slow speeds as well, you're very reliant on the mechanical grip of the car to get that rotation through the corner. So you are relying on a lot of different factors to get correct. 2:14.7, fifth fastest for Hillebrand. Currently it's Knops, your fastest driver out there at the moment.
Yeah, we've got most times on the board, just a few drivers that haven't been able to set one at this stage. And that is another thing that gives you an indication. Here's a track with just a small handful of corners over 4 some miles. It's mostly straightaways and very powerful cars, and yet it's over 2 minutes just to complete a single lap. So yeah, it's very high speed, very long, and mistakes will be costly in this qualifying session, with drivers not having many times to circulate around here. Knops still holding onto the top. Then Scullion now jumps up into second. Still only one car, Knops, has managed to break underneath that 2:14 mark.
Yeah, and now we're just starting to see them. So likes of Jerry Ferry moving up to second, Scullion moving himself up into third. Ben Scullion we look at right now, and Dennis Duna down in ninth. So we are starting to see that movement, and it does take a couple laps to get there. Martin Beyer moves third quickest then in the number 8 car, going to just a quarter of a second adrift off of Knops at the moment. So we are seeing a lot of movement. We are seeing a lot of drivers now finding confidence, because it is such a long lap here, Joe. They have taken 2 minutes 13 for a lap time out there. They're not going to get many attempts to get it right, so any improvements they find are going to be massive. A massive kick of tail from Duna, catching a little bit of grass there on the outside before rushing over towards the line. And that's a 2:13.7, the fastest final sector. Good enough to move fifth fastest.
Yeah, I was watching Darren Andrews on my timing screen because I see he's got 2 green sectors this last time, so I'm curious if he's going to jump up. Definitely needs one, and it does look like he's put one down now as he jumps into 6th position. Otherwise, he would have been starting towards the back of the field without a lap time. A lot of drivers really kicking up some dirt coming off of Newry Corner, trying to take it right up to the limit. Bert Knops still our fastest by about 0.2 of a second. He might get just the tiniest little bit of help from the slipstream of the car ahead there.
Yeah, and any help that you can get is huge for the Brabham Motorsports driver, Bert Knops. He knows how important it is, because he had all of that time, 0.2 up in the first sector. He lost all that time back in the second sector. He's up by 0.09 of a second right now, and would love to have another 1/10 of a second's worth of budget, but with a car there in the final corner, just a case of trying to warm up the tyres. Whoop, round you go, as easy as that. Now try and gear back up the power again and have one last attempt at finding a lap with 55 seconds remaining in qualifying. But that just goes to show you how quick he's going, because I thought he was backing off the way that he was wiggling through the corners. It seems like he's found a way to get that slowed down. Cantonen 0.2 quicker still.
Now down into the 2-minute 12-second marker. Cantonen, the fastest. Knops gets demoted to second, but stays on the front row. Watching to see, we are missing Tom D and Steph Hermans, along with David Hart, that still needed time. This is Darren Andrews, who I was mentioning earlier. He's been pushed down to 7th recently, but it does look like he's on a flyer. 2 personal bests in the first 2 sectors.
Yeah, and those personal bests being really important. Green there in the Baskerville Hobbyist racing car, and each and every time you're out there looking for pace, looking for time, looking for improvement, you're looking at what can you do to get to the car in front of you. It's 0.4 of a second that he needs, and currently it's only 0.6 off of the fastest time overall. So currently lining up for about 4th position overall in qualifying. Checkered flag is now out here, Joe, so no more improvements can be made. Andrews coming across the line, puts a 13.3 down and goes 5th fastest.
Nice improvement right at the end, but that's it for him. Cantonen, is he going to have a fast one? He is right on the ragged edge, it looks like, coming down through Tannery Corner. Then it's a blast across as he brushes the wall on the edge of Long Bridge and gets it woed up for Newry Corner. This one is all over the place. I'm checking to see. His first sector was nothing special. Second sector was an improvement. It could be a better lap, but it might not.
Well, it needs a bit of help here on this final section in the Écurie Atlantique, number 72. So there is still threats from behind. Hillebrand up to third. Knops there in second. Byers decided that he's done, and Ben Scullion is still a threat at half a second behind in fifth place. So there's no reason why he can't slow it down. Fuhrman goes to ninth place overall. Looks like Hillebrand and Bayer can't improve on their lap times, but now Oskari Kantanen locking it all up into the final corner. He pushed a little bit too hard, and the car behind does as well, because there goes Knops, clear by what is 0.2 of a second. What a disastrous mistake by Kantanen on his final lap. Knops had him scouted.
Wow. A mistake right at the last call could have cost him the pole position. I guess we won't know, but it did look like he had a shot at it if he wanted it. Just a couple more cars coming to the line. This is Tom D, who currently sits in 16th. He is improving. First two sectors are sitting green right now, but he's got to hit this brake marker. Like we said, it looks straightforward, it looks simple, but it is anything but in the car as he slams on the brakes to get it woed up. Coming in a Mountford corner, locks the brakes up just a tiny bit, gets on the power as he kicks out the tail. And what's it going to be as he crosses the line, Jake?
Well, it was so narrow trying to get this sorted out, but it is an improvement to 10th place. So that's enough of a smile. Be a second and a half off Mark Johnson in the Fish Motorsport number 18. Now also looking to try and find that improvement on the brakes, hoping that there is going to be enough there. I'm not sure whether this lap time is going to be one that counts or not. It doesn't look like it from the way that he's going around. So I think that will do as far as qualifying goes, and that will be that. So a wonderful element of qualifying put together, and it just goes to show you each and every lap is one that counts.
Love that it came right down to the end of it. So as we mentioned before, this is pretty simple. I like that they kept it simple back in these days. Race 1, 15 laps. That's all you got to know. It's going to be a sprint from start to finish. There's no scheduled pit stops or anything of that sort. It's get off the line and be the first to complete those 15 laps around here. A lot of the drivers were talking, Jake, about the beginning of the race being perhaps a bit of a sketchy place in the middle of the pack. These bridges are so narrow, they're going to have to play nice with one another.
They are. This is going to be about maintaining a rhythm of where you can attack rather than just attack here, there, and everywhere. It's a very different skill that you're going to have out here, and it's one that elements will exercise patience. You cannot, in this race, expect to make every corner an overtaking opportunity, especially when you're trying to make runs. You do have to time them. Sometimes you've got to be on the brakes a little bit earlier into one corner to give you that a chance to attack into another one, and especially when you've got the bridges there. Any chance of moving too wide, you are going to be going side by side, looking for what space you can, basically, to go and make these moves. I think these drivers are going to err on the sides of caution and take, I would say, more guaranteed places to make those passes. So I think into turn 2 at the viaduct is very much a place you can make a move. That final corner of Mountford is a place you can make that charge. And then over to the Tannery corner, I think, is another one where we could expect to see passes. So those three places, I think, are the most important places to pass. I think it's tough to go over the Kingsbridge and the Longsbridge to find those moves.
Well, it's going to be Bert Knops who hopefully gets there first. He's on pole with Kantanen next to him. Hillebrand and Bayer will be third and fourth. Ben Scullion starting P5, followed by Austin Birchfield in the 6th position. Row 4 has Darren Andrews to the inside, with Jerry Ferry starting to his outside. From there, Dennis Duna, good enough for the night today. Top 10 will go to Tom D, and Danny Foreman is going to be in 11th. Riley Wyans rounds out our 12th place position. Off into row 7, Andres Corrali will be starting 13th. Nicholas Kirsten in at P14. David Hart good enough for 15th position, and the Reese Gardner a bit far down for him, starting in 16th. Matt Wright, P17, will then be flanked by Gerard Ryan. And then you've got Ingars Martinovs in 19th. Paul Starzov's will start in 20th. Mark Johnson, 21st, will then see Steph Hermans to his outside. Robin DeVos last on our 23 car field. Will be plenty big, even as long as this track is, to keep the drivers busy throughout this race. Slipstreaming probably going to keep the racing close, Jake.
I would say so. This is a very long circuit, and so with these massively long straights that you've got on one side and the other, you've definitely got room to try and follow in the tracks of everybody else. But I don't think there's going to be as much slipstream as people necessarily think, because one of the big keys of slipstream is that, you know, you can gain a little bit more by the aerodynamics that's there. Not that much aerodynamics with these cars. It's very much a carbon shell with 4 massive wheels there on the sides, or actually a metal shell, I should say, with 4 wheels on the side. And so when you're looking about at it and saying, well, where are you going to go? How are you going to improve in terms of that time? Yes, there is a punching effect that you get through the air, but I don't think it's nearly as pronounced as it is now in more modern times. So I think you're going to be looking at, well, how do you go and make the moves, and how do you go and continue that pace? I think it's going to have to require a little bit more of carrying momentum through the corners to go and get that run, more rather than just sitting behind, having an average corner and just letting the power of the engine and the slipstream take effect.
Look at the counter scene we're seeing from Bert Knopps here. And here we'll definitely get a good visual on whether or not, it might have actually been a little help. I thought he was getting a tow, but that looked like the driver ahead gave a lift to let him through. This is down into Tannery Corner, which again looks simple on paper, but there's that little bit of a kink that leads into it that can throw the drivers off, so they do have to watch out. And they actually have some semblance of runoff into there. There is a farmland to the outside, but you have to shoot your way through the opening in the gate and commit to that. You can't try and make the corner, as he has even more problems with Newry here. So there are places where you can maybe get away with things a little bit, but it's going to be a narrow opportunity to try and get away with mistakes.
But having busy hands like that from Bert Knopps just goes to show you how much torque's in the back of these engines, how much they are trying to navigate through. And this is a car that doesn't generate its speed by having a massive engine. It actually generates its speed from its weight to power ratio. So when you look around at a car, for example, and say, oh, it does 400 brake horsepower, for example, one of the higher end cars, but it weighs 1.5 tons in terms of how it goes, it can only generate about 300 brake horsepower per ton by the way it's trying to navigate. But when you're looking around at, say, this car, yeah, it only does 220 brake horsepower, but it also weighs about as light as a paperclip sometimes, you would feel. So it's got a much higher weight to power balance and ratio, and that's why it can carry so much speed with the engine that it's got.
All right, cars are getting ready to grid up now. We're off for our 15 laps momentarily. First race of 2 today. And again, this is all to celebrate the Longford Memorial Hall. So a big thank you to everybody who has helped put this together for today's special event and that fantastic facility that not only celebrates this track, but all about Longford and the area around it, all the history of this place. In fact, from what I understand, the Memorial Hall has been around since the 50s, the 1950s. So it's been around for quite some time, but it's been refurbished in recent years, and hence why they are celebrating some of the fantastic stuff that they have added to that place. Here we see the drivers just about gridded up. We'll get a call from the horn at the top. That'll be their signal that it's almost time to go, and then there'll be a long call, and the green flag will fall. So listen up for that, and then we'll know, Jake, that we're about to go.
Yeah, and so these drivers will have a long launch along this front run, knowing it's a very quick start to this race, and they know as well that with what they're racing for, there's a lot of pride that's at stake with 2 races. Those in the top 10 have been reversed around then for this opening race. So those who qualified in first will start 10th. They will get the pole in refer to their original qualifying order for race 2, but for race 1, there should be movement.
Exactly. That's a good point. I had forgotten we have that inverse here. Looks like they're about ready as the flag is being held aloft. There's the warning signal. And there's the green flag. We are racing at Longford. It's a mad scramble off the line. A number of cars getting all out of sorts there. That's causing some 2 and 3 wide coming up into the first corner, which is a fast blast down coming towards the viaduct.
Yeah, it looked like Furman was the driver who didn't have the best of starts, and everyone had to try and navigate a way around. But there goes Duna sliding through the corner, just about full drift spec, holding it together. And this is going to be congested through the opening lap. Over the river then, they go for the first time in this race, and over towards the all-important right-hand bend out on circuit. We've got one car off on the right-hand side there at the back. Not sure who that is, in all sorts of trouble. But immediately, it's car 10 that finds itself in trouble, and that just goes to show you how tough the opening lap is.
Nicholas Kirsten apparently with problems. I tell you what, it's a good thing that Duna caught that car. If that was an accident underneath the viaduct on lap 1 with literally the entire field bearing down, we could have had very few cars for the remainder of this race, but we'll get away with it this time. So Duna leads, Jerry Ferry sitting in second, but for how long? Look at how much he's being hassled by more than one car, many cars. Birchfield, D, Canton, and Hillebrand all chasing.
Yeah, that's Ferry through, making the pass at the Tannery corner. They now go over the South Esk River and up towards Newry once again. Everyone dancing about, and round you go, and dropping all the time in the world. More contact there back, and 2 have now broken clear. It's an absolute free-for-all. Cantonen was one of the drivers turned around in that incident, and it just goes to show you, lap 1, everybody bunched up together. These drivers have to leave a little bit of space.
I think Birchfield, the other car that we saw, the blue and white that wound up off at the side of the track, there he is now, really in the thick of it, so he's got it going once again. Matt Wright also not looking like he's facing the correct direction. May have had more issues out of Newry Corner after that initial incident. One driver, unfortunately, those posts are solid, mate.
They are, and they will completely collapse the suspension. Mark Johnson trying to limp home, so Herman's out. Oh, up and over. That's a hefty accident.
Well, again, thank goodness this is sim racing, so no worry about safety on that, but he'll have to try and turn back around and head over for the feature race in a bit of time. Oh my goodness, this is getting scary coming through the first corners and what looks like to be a battle for third.
Yeah, this is Nico Hillebrand. He's trying to keep Martin Beyer behind. He's trying to keep Andrews there back as well. And the Spring-Op Wrench Sport car was right over to the inside, trying to cover off any move. He's now given a chance to break away because Beyer is the driver who has to try and look around here. Andrews, the one looking to go forward and to gain that space. And on the brakes into Longford corner. Look out for D. He's going to go straight on here at the opening section. And that could have been disastrous. Tom D finds somehow the gap in the middle and has to let everybody go, and it falls down to 12th to get back on the power again.
Already have had 4 DNFs. Kirsten, Hermans, Johnson, Gardner are out of this race, unfortunately. We still have 19 that appear to be running, but it looks like this track is indeed collecting a few, and we might be missing 2 or 3 more here. My goodness.
That's Starsov's who's off the road, and Martinov's as well, so it's both of the Far Cops racing cars there from the 2 Latvians in trouble. So big dramas at the back of the field, and it goes to show you a lot of power comes with a lot of responsibility. Beyer losing out the position to Andrews, locking up the inside front into Newry corner, desperate to get a rotation in the car, and you're looking at trying to get how much can you turn. And these drivers here, they do have to be mindful. Yes, you got chunky tires like having 4 Oreos on the side of your car, but you don't want to start flat spotting any way, shape or form. This is what happened to Nicky Kirsten.
Check out here at the start of the race. Just maybe got a little bit in the dirt. After that, it was all she wrote. Nicholas winding up in the fence and just tumbled around in a spin cycle. As we come back to Martin Beyer, who is still fighting with Darren Andrews here down in...
Oh, no.
Whoa!
It's Cantonen.
Mountford corner claims a few more.
Yeah. The contact there was never going to be helpful. Austin Birchfield and Oskari Cantonen into the final corner coming together, and it is showing up again how these drivers are looking around at each other in those elongated braking zones. It's just waiting for a car crash in slow motion because you know you can't do anything to get out of it. once you've hit the brake pedal down and you're looking around, Birchfield now trying to get himself settled, has to allow Corrali into position behind Scullion, and there's Corrali trying to really slide through the corners and prioritise that exit. And this was here where we saw that incident earlier on with Nicky Kirsten, and I think the issue he ran into was the fact that he was trying to avoid a car that was coming across to the middle of the circuit, nothing he could do. Cantonen still looking to try and recover back. Look at how he just takes a different line into the corner, tries to open out the exit so he can attack on this long straight over the tracks.
You can see the cars get super light there on the railroad tracks. And as they accelerate towards Tannery Corner, he's got a good slipstream. He's going to have to look around the outside as Birchfield will defend. These two both on a recovery drive, and thus far have made their way back into the top 10. But how much higher will they be able to climb? Earlier on the brakes for the Finn, so he'll wait for a better opportunity later.
Yeah, he certainly will look for that. Now let's take a look at what happened to Steph Hermans. Oh! So he almost runs into the back. Oh, and there's the 77, a pure T-bone. And well, at least Steph Hermans found himself out of the way in the farmer's field, but that is not what you want to happen. On the outside, up and over goes Birchfield. Troubles as well for the likes of Hillebrand.
Wow. Massive, spectacular wrecks that we've been seeing at the start of this race. Certainly a little bit messy. Birchfield, our latest official DNF at this stage. Amazingly, it looks like Starzov might still be back in this race along with Martinov. So I see them a lap down, so I'm not sure if they're simply taking repairs, hoping to try and get back out onto the track. Duna, by the way, is still our leader up at the top. Jerry Ferry running in second. We're watching the battle for 6 a little bit farther down. Corrali and Cantonen still in it, so he managed to avoid the drama that we saw there with Birchfield.
He did, and that was important because Birchfield was up and over with missing tyres, so no way of recovering that. Birchfield completely out of the race. So we'll take a look. This is what happened to Reese Gardner here, as he found a massive bottleneck going through the final section of the lap. Now looking to attack off the exit, gap there on the left-hand side. Oh, and they just tangle wheels. And for Reese Gardner, he ends up over the hill and far, far away on that left-hand side. So that's where we find the Southpaw Races retirement.
Real unfortunate there, and yeah, these cars can't beat and bang. In fact, that was another factor that drivers were trying to remind each other of, that they often will race sports cars in HRSC, so they're used to having some panels to lean on. That's not the case here. If you tangle wheels, it tends to be very quickly good night for our drivers. Matt Wright, whoa, is ahead of him. Big moment. Who was that? I'm trying to make out. Oh boy, is he able to get it going? Nope, looks like that's a big no.
Well, when you've got no power and you're on a steep hill like that, it takes everything to not fall down onto the riverbank, and that is just telling you how tough it is. So now DeVos out of this opening race. This has been a very attrition-filled start of 3.5 laps worth of racing. We have lost half the field already. We're down to just 12 drivers on the leading lap. Scullion nowhere to go against Andrews, looked for the power and just had to lift off slightly, so what was a mega run is tempered, but he still gets the look around the outside here onto the flying mile.
He's going to cut across, so yep, he is indeed clear now as we watch from aside the track. He's going to give a slipstream, though. Andrews could try and fight back coming down to the braking. He wants to, as he pokes his nose down to the inside at Mountford Corner, but you can see it's still a long ways before we even get to that apex. They should be getting on those binders there as the nose dips down and have to try and get the car woed up into this hairpin. A cut back from the 85 as well from behind them. A fight back down across the corner and a drag race down to turn 1.
Yeah, and now they'll look, because it's a fast turn 1 here. Ben Scullion out of position. It's Andres Corrali who's now looking for it down the inside and still hoping to move up to 4th and to give Andrews a piece of his mind. Diving down the hill, Ben Scullion watches on. and the brakes hit by Corrali and Andrews, all hit perfectly through the viaduct here at the 1/3 distance of the race by the time they complete. Wide there by Andrews, trying to use all of the road, and it goes to show you as they head their way to Longford Corner, Andros Corrali searches for the inside, wiggling under, braking, hoping for a line through at the Brewery Hotel corner, and still can't quite get it. Now you need the entire run to Tannery.
Oh, this is going to be fascinating. It's probably not wide enough for 3 wide, but it looks like Scullion wants it anyways. He's going to try and get in there. There's no room at the end. He has to wait patiently. He'll throw his hat in with the car that's got a little bit more momentum on the inside. I think it's Corrali for the time being. Darren Andrews, will he lose 2 positions and just 2 corners? It looks like he will.
So Ben Scullion now realises that the next phase of attack is going to be over this river out of Newry Corner. After getting that done on Andrews, who's dropped 2 places over the course of that section, they also look behind at the hard-charging Oskari Kantanen, who's definitely got pace here to go out there and burn. You've also got Nops there behind, who's been actually rather quiet in the way that he's been going about this race. Here is your HRSC replay. This is Austin Birchfield and why he found trouble. So as he goes through, so the posts were already taken up off of the ground by Hillebrand, and then he's basically just caught one errant, and there's nothing you can do at that point, and he's lucky he wasn't on his way to Launceston with the way that he had that incident.
Collected a couple others in the process as well. We're up to 8 DNFs already in this race. Scullion around the outside. Can he get it? Woed up car gets very sideways off the corner, and Corrali will be able to hold ahead of him. Darren Andrews still in there, but now Kantanen and Nops have joined the fray.
They're all there, and they realise that the more that you battle, the more time that you're going to lose. Nops as well, setting a new fastest lap there of a 13 flat, trying to chase up to this group. Look at them, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Throw a blanket on them. One driver breaks early. They all run into incident if they're not careful. Little lunge to the inside by Andrews. Not going to cut it then as they go underneath the viaduct, but back again they go over towards their next corner on track of Longford. They're over the King's Bridge, and it's a case of who is going to be ruling this next corner. Answer is nobody, and you've got that massive door to keep an eye out on. You want to be on that left-hand side. You want to be on the left jamb of that door in terms of where you point the car for your braking.
The longer they battle, the more that Nops is closing in bit by bit. Clearly fast, as you said, setting fastest lap of the race there before, and ready to try and challenge. And they're going to go side by side once again. Scullion versus Corrali down into the corner. Corrali to the inside, Scullion to the outside, maybe just a bit too far to the outside as Corrali gets the run.
Yeah, and this is what happens. You leave the door open and it's going to be one position there. And there goes through Kantanen as he sidles his way through on Andrews for position. So every place you're trying to navigate by, every position you're trying to work into a point of stupor, you are thinking, right, where can I unlock this next move? If you're Andros Corrali here, you're trying to run away from this group. At the moment, it is very, very fraught and dangerous and busy, and this is the sort of track and car combination that you'd like a little bit of quiet with. Here comes the look with the toe, moving over. Scullion on the outside is going to have the most difficult way around to try and make this pass.
He's got the momentum, though. Let's see who's deeper on the brakes once they get up to Mountford. And it looks like it is going to be Corrali, despite not having the momentum. Is he too deep? No, he makes the apex. No, he is too deep. He goes off the corner, squirms as he tries to get the throttle down. This is Scullion's chance.
Yeah, there's that desperation from Andros Corrali, just needing to try and carry through the corner. He hit the apex fine. He just didn't have enough turning angle to go and make through the rest of it. So they will duel their way through turn 1, duel their way down through to turn 2. And now here comes the chance from Oskari Kantanen, looking around the outside, hoping there's a move to be made. And he can't quite get there. Door left half ajar, though, by Scullion. That will allow Corrali a little bit of a chance to mistake. And all over the road is Kantanen, pretty much four-wheel drifting his way around, and just in front you can see the buckets of traffic that's there. Bayer through now on Ferry for second position because of the traffic, and they've dropped about 4 seconds on this lap.
Already they're having to deal with lapped cars out there, but with 5. This franticness is about to be kicked up even more, believe it or not, because surely Ben Knops is going to be using this speed to try to make some moves. He does not want to dilly-dally amongst this group and try to get by quickly, but he needs to be safe. It looks like it is fraught with peril.
It is very much. So when you're looking at where do you make this move, how do you make this move, you are trying to fall back into rank and file. You are trying to bring yourself into a place where everything is a little bit more simpler. The more complexity that you bring into a group, the less cohesion there is, and the more likely incidents going to happen. So when you got Scully in here with Andrews searching at Newry corner, you don't really want him to be out there attacking. You want him to fall into line and realise, right, I can't make this move. And as Andrews actually grabs the grass on the exit there of Newry, it now puts him in the hands of Knops, who wants to go make that pass. But Corrali here will have Canton and Scullion just breathing down his neck and looking for the pass, and here it comes.
Yep. So we're going to have a couple side-by-side battles down into the corner. Knops has the inside. What about the battle between Corrali, Cantonen, and Scullion? Oh, we looking 3 wide. There was a thought about it, but changed their minds, thankfully, just as they come up to the lap traffic, as no car's not going to be able to get out of the way. Maybe along the main straight. Knops will get the position. Scullion does not, but it looks like exiting off the corner, Corrali has Cantonen trying to outgun him.
Yeah, and if Cantonen's got the pace, then Scullion's going to realise that he's going to lose out here in this battle 15 seconds off the race lead. But Scullion gets a little bit of toe there from Corrali, but Cantonen's not done. He now pivots to the inside, which will turn to the outside here in towards the viaduct. So on the brakes again, just not able to make that move. Wide line by Knops through the corner as he battles the Brabham Motorsport car through in the number 3. So there's still a lot to try and unpick in the second half of this race, but we have to talk about the quiet driver in the room, which is Duna, who leads by 7.5 seconds over Martin Beyer.
He's certainly been controlling things at the front there. You see that bright pink car. Martin not even within visibility of him. That is not Martin that you see behind. That's a lapped car that he's currently ahead of. So despite that slide down at the first braking zone into the viaduct, it's been seemingly smooth sailing so far for Dennis.
Yeah, and that's smooth sailing for Dennis Duna. He just has to keep the pace up, and look at how they slide through. That's lap traffic that they're having to get by when you've got 5 trying to get through. I think it might be Starosov's that they had to just try and Starosov's to get by and move through. In fact, that might have even been Martinov's there, who's 4 laps down. So that was a nasty place to try and go through. And we're just getting note that Wright's now in the pits with damage.
So another driver with problem. Matt from Sussex Engineering Team is going to have to wait for another opportunity, usually very quick in this series. I was a bit surprised to see him as far down as he was, but seems like he'll have to focus maybe on the feature race from here. Maybe a longer event will give him opportunities to try to make up for it. Meanwhile, Darren Andrews still in a fight with this group, and as they come up, almost looked like contact there briefly with Cantonen, and the light blue and white that you saw maybe touching the back of Scally in a tiny little bit. And just take your pick on which position is who where, because it swaps, it seems, every single corner with this trio.
It does, and every time there is a piece of movement out there to say, where can you make the move? Why will you find that place? Where will you get that break? And Canton having to go 2 tyres in the grass to try and find the pass there. It's showing actually how good Corrali's been on the defence, because they haven't been able to unlock that pass. They haven't been able to find that movement that gets that play sorted. And really, with the way that Corrali's going about this, he's still keeping a very good pace up there to remain within 5 seconds of Jerry Ferry, who's there in the 3rd position overall. Lovely slide of momentum through the middle of the Longford corner, and then back up the hill they go over towards Tannery. I think it's been very clever the way that Corrali's been driving, and it goes to show you that you need at least a second's worth of pace in excess to go and make the passes around this track, even though these drivers have incredibly long straights to make it happen. Cantonen stuck again on the outside, car slow. In front of him is the 77 of Starosovs, but this time around the outside he gets that big drama in the back. Knops and Andrews.
Oh, and I was about to say that Knopp surprises me that he hasn't been able to move through them any quicker. Well, he's definitely not moving through them now as he's missing a wheel on his wagon. That's going to be our latest DNF.
Right, also declared as a DNF, so I think that puts us down to an unlucky 13.
You might be right. Yeah, it looks to be the few cars left, 10 out of the 23. Whew, it has been a bloodbath out there today as Corrali is still in it, but he's in the middle of the sandwich now. Cantonen manages to take that fourth place. Scullion sits in behind. I think it looks like Darren Andrews was able to carry on behind them and is still trying to play catch up.
Yeah, so definitely was put away by that, has lost 11 seconds, but Corrali's come back here at Cantonen, and he's made the move, but he's just got a little bit deep. Oh, and there's contact, front tire to rear tire, and they hold it together. Cantonen then holds his place and gets what he wants, which is fourth position, but look at how much it's costing them in terms of time.
I think that may have actually been a lapped car that we saw behind, that they're leaving behind, so that wasn't Andrews chasing on them. He's got a ways to go. Yeah, he's about 10 seconds back, so he's not with this group right now. A lot of brake smoke starting to come up as the drivers lock the tires, coming into some of these corners and kicking up the dust just to add to the mess in the air. Got to be careful about how much you do that. We've seen so many drivers caught out by simple mistakes today.
Well, I think what's important to keep in mind is that there are no curbs around this circuit. It's the old school days. So if you are going to want to go forward, you're going to have to use the grass out there, as there goes the 77 of Starsoft off the road. Darren Andrews a little bit further back. They've got those tyres in place there on the inside. Now, that is a deterrent to say, please don't kick up the grass around this section of the circuit, because you are going to have a very bumpy ride if you do. And there have been a couple quiet drivers here, like Riley Wyans, who's up there in 8th position all on his own, and also Hart in 9th and Furman in 10th. Just keep it out of trouble and you've got what you want from it. David Hart in P9, I'd say, is doing a great job.
Yeah, I would agree. And honestly, though we've seen Starsovs and Martinovs get lapped, in fact, 3 laps down and 4 laps down respectively, I mean, they're gaining a lot of positions from all the attrition around them. So they're still looking at a pretty good finish, probably close to the top half of the field.
Yeah, and that top half will be a huge boon for someone like Gerard Rion in the Belgian Turtle Yellow 38, going, well, I'm only 1 lap down. I'm now going to move through Knops on this next lap and go by. And drivers like Starsovs and Martinovs, this is the type of racing you look at and go, well, to finish first you have to finish the race. And you are buying that ticket to an end of a race and getting that result only at the end of the race. And just to put that pressure down further, there goes Duna to put another fastest lap on the board, a 2:12.8, as Cantonen again has to fight Corrali along the front straight.
Seeing a lot of this between these two. They've been putting on a show today, that is for sure. Some bravery, including right here through the kink of turn 1, coming over the crest, and then it's a big leap. Anybody willing to give way? Looks like it's going to be Cantonen who comes out on top in that group this time. Corrali is still fighting him as they swing around the viaduct. My goodness, they are on the limit of traction.
They are absolutely pushing this to 100%. And Oskari Cantonen, who has not been able to clear Anders Corrali in this pack at the moment, realises that the longer he leaves it, the more he leaves himself susceptible to Ben Scullion, who's very happy to stay on the back of this group, over the top of the railway tracks and feigning over to the right-hand side, lisking over towards the right before now you hit the long main part of this back stretch on track, the Tannery straight over to the Tannery corner, and still here comes Scullion looking for it. It's about who's the most aggressive on the brakes, and I'll tell you what, Cantonen proving that he was mightily strong on the brakes compared to Scullion, who was, I would think, a full second earlier on the brakes by comparison.
Over the long bridge. Oh, what a big slide up into the braking to Newry corner from Cantonen. He'll gather it back up, but that car has been a real mess at times coming into some of these braking zones. He's got to get this cleaned up if he wants to come home with this 4th place. Remember, this isn't even for the podium. This is just for 4th that these drivers are battling. The top 3 have kind of been off on their own, doing their own thing, but the fun has been down here. Corrali has the inside coming into the braking of Mountford. He's got good visual. He's going to move back in behind, just get a little bit more taste of the slipstream before he ducks out, but he knows he's not later. Oh, but both of them struggling to get slowed up. A little bit of the tire to the inside as Corrali discovers why those tires are there.
Well, they're there to stop you from just straight cutting over, and if you're not careful over there, you might hit a tree root or something down at the final corner of Mountford. So Corrali trying to get it slowed up and just can't manage it there, having to have a second little wiggle through the corner to open the steering to not hit those tyres once more. These drivers want to push to the absolute limits, and Corrali, the widest car in all the world, is drifting through every corner to try and stay in range and give a chance to attack, but that gives me the sign that Corrali is starting to fade here, cannot keep the pace up, and Ben Scullion, it's only a matter of time.
Those tires are going to be melting if he keeps this up. Scullion knows it, so Corrali maybe going to have to try and race a little bit tidier for a bit as we check in on Jerry Ferry. I mentioned our podium drivers way off in the distance, about 5 seconds up from Canton right now, which makes me think with how hard they're fighting, I feel like Canton and Corrali could probably catch Ferry, but they've just been so concerned with one another.
I think that's been the aim of the game, really, that a driver like Jerry Ferry hasn't necessarily shown major amounts of pace. He's just shown great consistency when everyone's been battling behind. Well, don't worry about me. I'm just going to continue on. It's the get on and do mentality. Dennis Duna has driven fantastically. Remember, this is a Dennis Duna that took the race lead through the opening corner of this race and has not looked back. Qualified the car 9th overall in this one and has shown he's actually got a very good race pace.
Racing for Sim Racing Holland, and that bright pink is, you might not think is traditional for these sorts of cars, but remember back in this era, they didn't run sponsors. They actually would run usually traditional national colors based on either the team or the driver themselves. And that bright pink was actually the color used by Egypt. Now, I don't know if, considering he runs for Sim Racing Holland, if he has any ties to that, but certainly an interesting choice. And like I said, not actually an outrageous color to choose.
No, I wouldn't say it's outrageous at all in terms of where everyone sits and their nationalities becoming their colours. There's a reason why Aston Martin, for example, runs British Racing Green, because that's what it was. The colour of Great Britain was this dark green that you had. So you get that sense of pride when you first started racing. That mentality of each car is going to be there in a different way. It's why the Ferraris are red, for example, and Alfa Romeo is predominantly a red-coloured car, and Maserati, to begin with, was red because red was the color of Italy.
Exactly. And for drivers like Canton in here, it's actually one of my favorites because they literally get to put their flag on the car. Often you'll see them with the crossbar on it. Now, I don't think Canton actually has it on his, but it is those traditional sort of blue and white for Finland. And typically there is a color coming across it, very close to actually the American colors, which is sort of a darker blue stripe with white on the car traditionally. Ben Scullion looking like he's maybe representing a bit of that Italian contingent here as he comes down, continuing to chase, but now starting to lose a little bit on that battle for two.
Yeah, because Corrali and Canton, I think, have decided to step up here in the final 3 laps of this race. And Ben Scullion, I think, has been unable to really close up and maintain that 1.5 seconds back. I think that's just a case of, I can't keep that pace. It's 11.5 seconds up. If you're going to continue battling like this, round goes Ascari. Canton, I'll do exactly this. Pick up the pieces.
Well, it was great until it wasn't for Ascari. I mean, he could still try and come back, but it's only 2 laps left. He needs a mistake from those in front of him to try and catch back up. I mean, yeah, 2 laps left. Excuse me. I was going to try and recount here because we're just about to finish this lap, but coming to lap 14 will mean 2 to go for Dennis Duna. I have been told there are no ties to Egypt. He just picked this pink color. So hopefully Dennis will watch this back and I guess learn a little something about his taste.
Very much will, and will very much understand that this has been a very solid drive from what he's been able to do. Martin Beyer is no slouch as a driver in the Scuderia Cisalpina at this moment in time. But when you look at Beyer, he is someone who can always go and win a race, especially in the classics. To be out there and increasing that gap over the last couple of laps to 9.5 seconds. Martin Beyer is nobody to shake a stick at for how you go out there and race with. Duna has done, quite simply put, the best laps possible, and there's nothing that Beyer could do except resign himself to that second place. Jerry Ferry for Neves Racing in third and happy at the gap because Corrali has now just lost that 4th place to Scullion.
And Duna has been quick, but he's not been the quickest. Interestingly, Beyer has the fastest lap of the race right now at a 2:12.3.
Oh, Cantonen.
2:12.8. What's happened to Cantonen now?
He's out.
Oh. Man, and again, it goes back to what I had said earlier, where it was great until it wasn't. He seems so fast, but he got caught up in that early incident. He was trying to fight his way back forward. Are we sure he's out? I'm not showing him as a DNF right now.
I'm seeing him on screen right now as a DNF here on our timing tower, and there around goes Scullion into the fence on the left-hand side, and that puts him in a position now of trouble. So Corrali moves up into 4th position, and 5th now falls Ben Scullion.
So, looks like we'll see Corrali be able to pick this one up. Maybe my timing and scoring may have frozen. I'm going to try and see if I can refresh that, but it looks like it is staying up on our screens. There's Cantonen with a massive accident underneath the viaduct. It is honestly usually picked out as one of the more dangerous spots on this track.
It is, because you've got the brick walls of the viaduct there on the left and right, and what he's done is he's clipped one of the posts as he's trying to attack through as we now go on to the final lap of this race. He just clipped one of those massive posts on the right-hand side, and that just sent him back across, missing the guardrail on the left and straight down into the ditch. So that's why it's the end of the race there for Oskari Cantonen on what is a race for him that could have been so much more if he just had the patience.
This might be the first time all race that Corrali's been able to breathe, frankly. He's just been battling other cars nonstop. Scullion has dropped back to about 5 seconds behind, so he's not really hassling him at this point. Ben, of course, has been doing a pretty good job, just hasn't seemed to have the speed that those around him have had in this race. In fact, this is the most separated I think we've seen the entire field in this one as we've entered the final lap, and Duna just has about 3/4 of a lap to take victory.
Well, he's got everything he wants right now. A 10-second margin at the front of this field. I would say a Sunday drive that he's had in this one right now, where he hasn't had to worry about anybody behind, and he's still dancing it through the corners. I'd say he's driving within his limits at 99%, and he has done what he's needed to over the course of this race, Joe. Just keep everybody at bay. When everyone falls around him, he's the driver who stands up, because you look around at Birchfield and Hillebrand and Knops and Cantonen as drivers who could have challenged him. Martin Beyer, who has been. He's staved all of them off, and now he's just got one flying mile, and this one will be a big smile for him, Dennis Duna.
To your point about him driving within his limits, yeah, he's about half a second off of the fastest lap right now, with Corrali actually finally getting that. That tells us that Andres probably had a lot more pace, and yeah, maybe could have run down Jerry Ferry if he wasn't battling with other cars for so long in today's sprint event. Duna, though, finally gets on the brakes for the last time of our sprint race, gets it down. Well, doesn't bother the apex, honestly, doesn't need to. He's so far ahead. All he has to do is go through the gears and cross the line to win the sprint race here for our sim racing event for Longford Memorial Hall.
A simply dominant drive. Martin Beyer, give him credit. He was able to get to second, but not much he could have done outside of that, so he picks up that second place. And Jerry Ferry there in third, just kept it out of trouble all day long, and it's a very well-deserved podium for him. And what tenacity from Andres Corrali to hold off the countless challenges behind, including that driver there, Ben Scullion. What a fourth for Corrali.
Here's Darren Andrews down and across in 6th position. Behind him, haven't talked about Riley Wyans hardly at all, but a nice quiet run to a 7th place finish, I think deserves a bit of a pat on the back. David Hart and Danny Foreman behind him. Interestingly, Kantonen, because his DNF came so late, I think is going to finish ahead of a number of our lapped cars.
Yeah, and that's important here. So those lap cars there, Gerard Rion in the pit. So he's had an issue on the final lap of the race. And so he's now going to, I think, stay behind Kantonen. So I think Kantonen may just still get a top 10 finish.
Tells you how fast he was racing. Maybe he can clean it up a little bit because he will need to go longer in this one as it's going to be 28 laps when we get to grid it up for race number 2. Danny Foreman here in his number 24. Going to be the last car on the lead lap and finishing what looks like within about 50 seconds or so of the lead. Considering it's over 2 minutes a lap, that's actually not too bad compared to the leader over 15 laps. So the Auriga Autosport car comes down, looks for his brake marker, and gets ready to complete race number 1.
Yeah, in 9th position you'd certainly take, and it is a very tough race out here around Longford. It's one where we've seen a lot of attrition in that opening run because there is nowhere to go when you do have those incidents, and we've seen a lot of them be isolated. Fuhrman has been isolated for the second half of this race, and sometimes that's just what you need to guarantee a finish.
Longford has really shown us its fangs today. It is a fierce track, and it will gobble him up. Dennis Duna, your winner, followed by Martin Beyer coming home in second, and Jerry Ferry going to be rounding out your podium for today's race. It was frantic at times, but the drivers managed to come away from it with about, I think, 11 or 12 finishers in the end. And there you see them as Ferry in third with Corrali in fourth, having to fight hard for that one over Scullion in fifth and Darren Andrews in sixth. Riley Wyans was behind them in P7 with David Hart in eighth, Danny Foreman in ninth, and as we said, Kantonen going to be classified in 10th despite a DNF.
Yeah, so ultimately going over the limits of racing because the likes of Gerard Rion had an incident on the final lap, could only go 13 laps into this race. Paul Starasovs and Ingars Martinovs would be 3 and 4 laps down respectively. And then you hit the retirees likes of Bert Knops and Matt Wright were big names to find retirements. We saw what happened to Tom D over at Longford Corner with Robin DeVos down in the ditch. Nico Hillebrand and Austin Birchfield both out at the same time. It was Hillebrand's smacking of the posts which brought Birchfield's retirement into play. Also likes of Mark Johnson, Steph Hermans and Nicky Kirsten we saw early on in the race. And Niklas Kirsten out as the first of 23 drivers. But there is good news here, Joe. Those who are out of the race, they have another opportunity and they'll run with their qualifying positions, making life really hard for Dennis Duna to move through the field and take the double. Exactly.
He had that regrid to help him out on this one, and he used it to great effect. But he is definitely going to have to work hard for the second one. And thankfully, unlike real life where you'd have to turn back around and get the car prepped in time for that second race, here they just get a fresh car and off they go once again. I tell you what, Jake, I mean, we often talk about the bravery of modern drivers and the speeds that they deal with. But I watch this and I think, because we have to remember, yes, this is a sim, this is a game that the drivers are racing in. But this was a real track, and these were real cars that raced on this at one time. Can you fathom being in one of these cockpits and doing the things these drivers did?
I think they'll look around and see the incidents that they've had and the retirements that they've had and realize, aren't I lucky that I get to do this virtually for fun rather than that's my job career path, and that could have been the end of my life if I had any one of those accidents. It was such a dangerous sport out there that you looked around every time you went out onto the circuit, you had a 33% chance of losing your life out there at one point in time. That's why the likes of Jackie Stewart made massive piloting strides to improve the safety of the motorsport. And so it wasn't just just a case of drivers going to a funeral every other week instead of going out and racing. So I think they'll look at this and say, we're so privileged to be in a position that we can experience what these drivers of the past had to do so in such a safe and controlled environment. It does also mean, in my view, that they are pushing limits that other drivers wouldn't necessarily have pushed. That's why I think the racing is a lot closer, because at some point, you know, these drivers of old would have looked around and go, yes, we're racers, but do I lift off through into this corner if I know that I've got a 1% chance of losing the car, going up over the banking and losing my life? I think a lot of drivers of that period would have just lifted off slightly and said, I can't push as fast as them because I've got a lot more to lose.
We've got third place ready to chat with us. Jerry Ferry can give us his perspective on what it's like in this sim to get a taste of these drivers. Jerry, you had a lot more quiet one than those behind you. I don't know if you saw any of that battling happening behind, but it looked like you used this regrid position to great effect.
Oh, it was very scary when I realized I was in third position, knowing how fast everyone else behind me. But after first lap, I realized just the chaos, that everyone else had a worse race than me, and I had enough pace to just keep up. Sure, I think you might have seen the mistake I did around Martin Bayer, but apart from that mistake, it was kind of a boring race. But I'd rather take a boring race with a third position than an exciting race where I die on lap 2.
Yeah, no, I'm with you as well on that one. Are there any lessons that you can take from this sprint race for a 28-lap feature? It's a lot longer.
I think it's mostly just be calm, know where you are, know where the pace, and just make sure you don't lock up, because a mistake here can really mess you up, especially on the braking. If you might have seen, my one mistake could have been very bad. I could have lost everything. So just find my pace and just try to be consistent.
I think that's a fair assessment. Well, I mean, congratulations on a top 3. It looks like we're going to be heading over for our feature race here shortly, so congratulations.
No, it's my pleasure.
It's Jerry Ferry, who comes home with a podium. He'll spray the champagne at least once today. Can he do it for the bigger event here in a moment? As like we said, they will not have the regrid of those top 10s. So they're going to be starting in slightly different positions for the top group. Jake, could make for a very different complexion, especially now that they've also gotten a feel for the start of this race. Will we see it be less chaotic into these first few corners, or are they going to be even more anxious to try and get spots?
Yes and no. It can go either way. I think that if drivers realise that the first 2 laps of that race pretty much set the tone for how this race ended up becoming, then they'll realise that they'll want to get on and make moves early, especially if they're 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, going to get those places, gain those spots, and gain that momentum early to set themselves up later on in the race. If they're thinking about it properly and they're smart about this one, though, Joe, they'll realise that they've got a lot more laps to work with here. They've got a lot more opportunities to make passes. They've got time to build gaps. They've got time to chase gaps down. And so because of where they sit, because of where they're looking at in terms of this race, Joe, I think that if you're smart about it, it's a much tamer start to the race, because you want to give yourself every opportunity to win. And as such, you got to give yourself every opportunity to get through the opening couple of laps and set yourself a rhythm around this track.
I'm sure rhythm is going to be very difficult, considering these straights are so long out there. You get so much time to relax. You're not going to be able to really get into that brake, accelerate, corner, back and forth that you tend to do in some more technical circuits. It's going to be hit that gas, look for that marker, wait for it, and get on it as soon as we can. So they're in the warm-up now for this second race. We'll be gridding up shortly for it, but the drivers probably feeling those butterflies once again, knowing that we are getting ready to get started and getting those last few practice laps in before they get a last opportunity to try and take a good finish in these Formula 2 vehicles.
Yes, and I think it's really important that these drivers look around and say, well, what is going to be my finish? How can I go and improve on where I've gone? And when you lose half the field in effectively half of the race time that you got for this one, I think they're all looking at, well, how do I improve? There'll be a number of drivers who would have looked at that opening race, found that they only went a couple laps and have no real feel for what this circuit is and what this circuit does. I think those drivers who were able to get themselves into play and race realised that they've got a massive advantage over those who didn't finish by just having the lay of the land, just having the ability to have put laps down on the circuit, to have that confidence of knowing where to brake and where to turn. And so for those who haven't had that opportunity to race, like Nicholas Kirsten, for example, they desperately need these 10 minutes.
Indeed. Now, the other thing is it does look like it's looking just a little hazy right now. One thing to keep in mind for race 2 is they have predicted that there's going to be some weather a little bit later on. So now imagine trying to spot those brake markers and add moisture on the track, Jake.
Yes, in the dry, we lost about half our field. Now suddenly you put dry to wet into play, and I think this becomes a completely different game in its entirety. I think this is going to be a really tough showcase out there for a number of drivers, and especially when they've got to try and keep dialing back and dialing back and dialing back with their braking markers and working out where they need to be. I think they'll be praying for rain earlier rather than later, just so they've got enough time to adapt to the situation. If it comes late, then it's going to be a complete throw of the dice in terms of how you respond and react in the situation.
Now, we're hearing that this haze is just a very light mist that they're getting right now. It's saying, I'm looking at our time and scoring, it's saying rain 30%, and the wetness is 0 to 5% on the track. So very lightly wet on the circuit itself. So not quite enough to affect it as badly as you would think, but certainly enough to probably change those grip conditions out on the circuit. And the driver's already getting a taste of what it's going to be like out there. Woo! Nicholas Kirsten has been Mr. Excitement in these 2 races. What little he had in that first race, it's been sliding all over here in the warm-up.
Oh, and that's a hit that says, oh, goodbye. And look at this in the warm-up. It's wet here in this
really
warm-up.
Yeah.
So they are looking around at it and going, well, now we are trying to get a little look at these different conditions. The rain coming down very finely. And for Nicholas Kirsten, you know, these drivers are thinking about, well, where can I hit the brakes? Where can I go about and deal with the scenario that's presented in front of me? There's blue skies on the horizon, but no guarantees. But look at how much you're having to slide. You have to wait even longer to put the power down, especially over the top of the railroad tracks. What happens when you get air and you come back down on the circuit and suddenly there's no grip for the tires?
Well, and also consider, because this is something that I brought up yesterday in another vintage series that we cover, is look at how exposed the driver is as well. This is very different from modern F1, where they're really tucked down inside of it, and they've got the helmet, as Nicholas has found the barbed wire fence, unfortunately. Is think about doing 170, and you only have goggles on, no full face helmet, and raindrops are hitting your face. I'm sure that's not a pleasant sensation.
No, I don't think it is either, and especially when you consider that it's not a full helmet out there, you've got a partial helmet. You know, imagine going out on a motorcycle and you've got your full levers on and it's raining and you feel that sharp stabbing pain of the rain as you go out there riding at about 60, 70 miles an hour out there on your freeway, your highway, your motorway, your autobahn, etc. You look around at what they're doing and they're going upwards of 150 miles an hour in certain sections of this circuit, looking to try and hit the brakes and go forward. It's physical out there. It's weathering out there for all of these drivers. They have to navigate through some of the toughest conditions out there, not just for the car, but themselves as well. This was proper endurance back in the day.
Absolutely. You can only fathom the groan that you get from inside the cockpit when they tell you it's about to rain a little bit later on. Of course, they didn't have radios, so they would have had to tell you before the race got started. Mark Johnson right now in the last bit of warm-up. Didn't get to see a whole lot of Mark because he was another of our early retirements, so he's trying to see if he can have a little bit more fun in this one and get to the end. But watch out for that lack of grip out there, because as we said, we've got definite rain. And now, well, interestingly, I'm showing rain is switched to 0%, so it looks like it stopped, but it was coming down so hard that it's now up to the wetness on the track. So we may see the drivers having to deal with even more slipperiness here in just a moment. Coming out of Mountford Corner as drivers emerge out of the paddock area that is off in that field, getting ready to go racing on the track in these final moments of preparation. Same 23 drivers should be competing in this one, so no changes on that front.
No, none needed. Mark Johnson with the fastest time of a 2:24.9 then in the warm-up currently. And I tell you what, that is very stark. They have to tell you to brake around here because of just how quick the corners come up upon you. So you are very much looking around at every corner going, well, how early do I need to go? And the answer is earlier than you think, each and every single time. There's not too much flow out there. It feels very stop-start in terms of the way that it's all built and generated here at Longford, but when you do hit a patch of flow, for example, like you come out through the viaduct and you're going over the river, it's very much a case of trying to navigate and maintain, because you do get into this rhythm of stop-start when you try and go through, and a lot of modern street circuits, by comparison, have a lot of those 90-degree corners that you look at and go, oh, really? 90-degree corners? That's all what street circuits are. But when you do hit a flowing section of street circuit, it almost throws you off your rhythm by the fact that it's got rhythm.
All right, well, who's got rhythm out here today? With a minute 40 left in this warm-up, we should be gridding quite shortly. I do like Riley Wyans' sort of metallic gold paint scheme. Vet City Motorworks here for the number 13 car. Certainly hoping he'll be able to take gold today, no doubt, as they go by all the cars parked up there. Coming around the outside and flying down one of these long straights, which I believe is, this looks like the Flying Mile that they're heading down currently up towards Mountford Corner, and unfortunately finds himself off to the edge. Looks like we're going to end warm-up a little bit early for today's race, so we start to grid the cars up. Let's get ready for 28 laps around this track.
And those 28 laps, I think, are going to be some of the most important laps out there. And especially over the first 5 to 10 laps, I think the race is going to be set here, Joe, with the order as it was in qualifying.
Indeed, Bert Knops on pole with Cantonen in second, Hillebrand P3, and Martin Beyer starting in fourth today. From there, you've got Ben Scullion in fifth, Austin Birchfield in sixth, and Darren Andrews in seventh. Jerry Ferry trying to come back from eighth. That's going to be a little bit of a harder ask to get onto the podium once again. Then it's Dennis Duna from ninth. Can he do a double? That'll be tough. Tom D in 10th, Danny Foreman in 11th, and Riley Wyans starting from 12th. This is the drivers that weren't regrid in that first race. Is Andrus Corrali from 13th to 4th last time. Can he do that again? Kirsten 14th, Gardner 15th, and Hart starting from the 16th position. Then it's Gerard Rayon in the 17th spot, Martinov's 18th, and Starzov 19th. Mark Johnson will start from 20th today, and then the last few cars that we'll see on the grid will be Steph Herman's 21st, Robin DeVos 22nd, and Mifon Wee-Fleur starting in 23rd. So as we wait for visuals of that grid here, drivers should be pretty well lined up at this stage. Yeah, it looks like almost all of them out there on the grid. Oh, he's got the flag aloft. We don't have to wait at all. There is the horn, and there is the green flag. As it's a great start for Cantonen off the line. He blasts up into the lead. He does not want to mess around with any sort of battles this time around, knowing that he has got pace. Car off into the dirt a little bit farther back as we watch from above. Now comes the tricky braking down into the viaduct, Jake.
Yeah, and this is where you've got 4, 5 cars all in a line. 6th and 7th now looking to battle it out there. And there is Due in that 8th position then. It's already made one off of the start. But navigating through the pack looks like to be all important here on the get-go. We've got a couple cars there. I think that's DeVos, who's maybe a little bit further back down the order there, struggling at the viaduct. But ultimately, I think most drivers got through that okay through the front.
It's looking like we're clear for the time being. Wyans with a couple cars sliding sideways in front of him. That gives him a good shot to try and out-drag them down the Tannery straight. Over the railroad tracks they go. It looks straight, at least from above, but you can see we've got these slight little bends all throughout this long run down to Tannery Corner. Cantonen might not be able to hold on to the lead forever. Here comes Knops up the inside. He's got it into the braking zone.
He's comfortably got it. He got that a long way before the braking zone. So Kantonen having to lift out of it and allow Knopf into play. Both drivers, of course, retired in the sprint race that we had. Bayer in third, Hillebrand fourth, Scully in fifth, and Andrew sixth. So they're still there. We've got a couple yellows out there because Starsovs is out of the race. Your first retirement in full display.
I think that was Scullion in that red car that we saw going off track.
Bayer.
So more problems as drivers find themselves with problems here on lap one. Hermans and Starzovs officially out. Bayer facing the wrong way.
Yeah, and that's coming up to the Newry corner, so it just goes to show you how much of an issue he's had. And there's Mafanwi Fleur, and that is a long way back. It's not often that you see a car off like that on circuit, so she's got a bit of work to do to get back into play. Andrews is now there. That's now 3 retirements in this race on the brakes. They're all going to go, and look at how much squirreling there is. And there comes the look from Duna down the inside, and that's suddenly P5.
Fantastic stuff. Dennis showing why he took that win on the first race, just easily scything through some cars in the first lap. We're only on lap 2 now of these 28, but that was plenty of excitement. Still, the track is just a little bit wet out there, but it's getting more and more dry. And we don't have any rain at the moment. We'll see if any more comes later on in the day. Ben Scullion, so you were right. It was Bayer who we saw out to the side of the track. Scullion up to third currently.
Yeah, and smiling about that is Ben Scullion, who looked like he had a certain amount of pace when he went through earlier on in this one. So he was looking at it saying, you know what, I'm in a good place, and he's got to be very careful off the exit there, because if you attack too hard at the exit of Longford Corner, you've got that line of trees there on the left-hand side, which pretty much jut out of you, and if you even stare at them funny, you're going to find yourself wrapped around it.
Top 3 pulling away a little bit, although it looks like Scullion's got Hillebrand hot on his heels, trying to keep him honest. And don't count out Duna in that bright pink machine. Coming down into the braking zone, Duna sees the 70 of Hillebrand give a big look, but nothing doing into Tannery corner. Now it switches back. Things get a little bit more technical coming up over Long Bridge and into Newry corner, but everybody going to be focusing on the exit of this double right-hander.
Yeah, because this is where the Flying Mile brings itself into full display. We've got one car down in the pits at the moment there, as we had a couple of yellows out there in Sector 2. So we'll expect to see a couple drivers then finding that a little bit troublesome. But here's Duna on the back of Hillebrand now, and Scullion. So this is now a look for 4th place here, just going through the ringer. So that's Bayer down in the pits right now, and everybody is starting to search for, well, where can we find a little bit more pace? So here comes the looks, and best way to defend to attack if you're Nico Hillebrand, and we're almost 3 wide as they go through. Scullion on the outside trying to outbrake Hillebrand into the final corner of Mountford, and will manage to outbrake him. So there's still more chances to be had, but now you've got to be pick and choose in terms of how you get those moves. Kantonen unable to break away. It's a 5-car train at the front, and here's the replay of Paul Starsovs.
Starsovs, one of our DNFs 4 we've gotten so far, outbreaks himself and into the side. Just trying to make out who that was.
That was Fleur.
Oh, and after Fleur had put so much effort into racing the iRacing Bathurst 12 hours, hops over here, missing the first race, and it's over before she even gets a shot.
Yeah, it's a real shame, that. And when you put in that time and effort to get into that racing, to have it taken away from you before even half a lap's completed, it's just something that happens. Now, we've just lost Hart from this race. So David Hart now also out in the early stages of this, as there's Riley Wyans dancing about on the inside, grabs a little bit of the inside tyre, and that is Corrali getting that defence sorted and going into 9th. Corrali up 5 spots already and looking like he's going to make some moves again.
He's very lucky that Wyans didn't bound into the side of his car. You can see him clip that inside tire on the curbs, or you could call the temporary curbs there for the track. So what's happened to David Hart? This is coming down to the viaduct and unfortunately hitting that bright yellow pole. And did we get the car of Kirsten? Yeah, Kirsten managed to sneak through that. Impressive.
Yeah, and then David Hart tried to get that turned around, realised that the damage there of being wrapped around the braking post hasn't really worked out for him, and that's that. And look how aggressive that is from Corrali, going up through into Newry corner. Very lucky to keep that pointed down. And now for Riley Wyand, there is a hard-charging Reece Gardner behind, who remembers had a lot of time to sit and wait and watch after retiring from the opening race. So Riley Wyand will have to look out. And so now it's time for the Aussie from Perth to try and figure out whether there could be a look into the top 10 as Hillebrand goes third.
No defense down the inside, at least for now, from Wyans. Is the open door going to be an invitation to Reece? Will he try and outbrake him into the corner? Doesn't quite move in there yet. No, he will sit behind, not able to try and make the attack in front of them. Corrali struggling to make the corner, does not make the corner. And that's going to be 2 and 1 for Reece Gardner as he picks the pocket of both of them.
Well, he'll say thank you very much as he goes by and takes those places. You don't look at those in the mouth, and he's got a really big smile. We take a look at him right now from what he's got to do. He's got to drive with a very modified sim rig wheel out there at the moment because he's got no use of his right hand out there. So how difficult is it, Joe, say, taking all of this and driving with 2 hands is the most difficult. He's got to do it with effectively 1.
Yeah, those with physical disabilities, I always admire getting into sim racing because they're doing just as much, if not oftentimes way better than most of us, with even less at hand. And I'd say that Reece Gardner does a very good job with that because he's usually up at the front of the pack. I'm expecting him to continue to climb here as he sits in 9th right now.
Yep, and Hillebrand having a moment there that changes, but at the front, Kantanen couldn't run away, and there goes Knops down the inside over to Tannery corner, gets it done, and that ever squirrely Brabham Motorsports car on the brakes. There is the pass that confirms the move through. So Bert Knops, now your race leader here, lap 4 of 28.
Probably going to want to be making up for what happened last time out, leading this race over Askari Kantanen. The Finn staying right on him, not letting him get away quite yet. He'll be using that slipstream, no doubt, to try and hold on as long as he can. They've only got about a 1.5 seconds over Ben Scullion, so Ben could become a factor too if they start battling too much. And Reece, did he have a mistake or does he run it away? Whoa, that was a big moment for Birchfield. Reece just sneaking by the inside.
Well, that's why you got to have a little bit of a hold your breath moment there, because each and every time you're out there, you're hoping you don't find yourself in a mistake. So yes, Gardner's dropped back. He's had a mistake somewhere, but Birchfield, a bigger one, very nearly the end of that race. On for third as there goes through Dennis Duna, through on Ben Scullion, and now onto the podium. Duna is on a mission right now, and he's got Kantanen and Knops, the only 2 out there to try and navigate back through.
I mean, Duna has been a revelation. And I've been told he is a late entry for this. So he came in with a splash, taking that first victory, already back up to the podium. How far back is he? Yeah, he's only about 2 seconds behind. Mark Johnson will not see a finish in either of our races, it looks like, and neither will Robin DeVos.
It looks like the 2 might be linked there, so that is a very, very big accident. We'll try and catch that on a replay at some point, but that is a big accident to have, to see both of them out of the race. Ingars Martinov's having a great run here in 12th position, had to run 4 laps down for the majority of race 1, so here in race 2, up in P12, I'd say take that.
Yeah, I mean, he was definitely compromised being involved in an incident on the first one. I was really glad to see him carry on. I much prefer drivers to try and get the car to the finish if they can. So here's Mark Johnson for the Fish Motorsports team. This is up into Long Bridge. Oh, he finds the edge of it, and he's in a horrible spot for DeVos, who has no place to go. And before he can get the car towed back into pits to avoid being a part of a bigger accident, he gets hit.
Yellow flags are there for a reason, and you got to look at them. And I think drivers in the sim racing realm here, Joe, have such a look at yellow flags and think, oh, they're all advisory, I can get through anything because that's what I'm able to do. But no, you do need to slow down for them for that exact reason.
Yeah, when you start to get involved in real racing, you realize just how serious it is that the drivers give heed to those yellow flags. It's very much a safety thing, and Well, here in the sim, like we keep saying, there's not the safety aspect of it, but getting to the finish is always important, and unfortunately not going to do that if you take too great of risks out there. Kantonen versus Knops. This looks like it's going to be a good one, but the question is Kantonen just playing patient here? Oh, that was a slide from Duna there we saw in the foreground. Skullion has a chance to get back into the fight.
Well, this is where you're looking around and thinking, do I need to be pushing this hard? Because Dennis Duna knows how quick Knops and Kantonen can be on their own. He's worked really hard to get from 9th on the grid up to 3rd, and now he's looking around and seeing that Ben Scullion's still looking to try and put that pressure on. He's not going to get everything his own way in this race, but he's got to give himself a couple laps to try and gather back up. He doesn't need to go at 100%, but he still needs to try and find a pace that keeps Kantonen and Knops in some realm of chaseable.
Yeah, that last lap for Duna, 2:15.8, which was still only a 10th off of Oskari Kantonen, actually. So not doing too shabby, even with that big slide into the corner. Definitely seems fast. Question is, what's going to happen with that battle with the bright red of Skullion? Meanwhile, the 64 continuing to be a real thorn in the side of Wyans. Corrali is going to get a good run up and over the train tracks.
Yeah, and for Riley Wyans, he'll look at that and realise that Anders Corrali is very good at making these sorts of moves. You can't just sit down and think that there's nothing that's going to happen here if he pulls up alongside. He's going to go for it with each and every chance, but this time he decides he's going to back out of it. Wyans trying to outbrake him here as they head themselves into the Tannery corner, and he'll survive for a moment as he looks on left. Duna losing out then at the Tannery corner. That's Ben Scullion back through.
I wondered with how close he was getting if he was going to have a shot, and the rain is starting to return. It's very light for the time being, so not coming down heavy, but mixed conditions here today, just adding to the complications. Who will thrive in this back and forth set of weather?
Well, that back and forth is where they start looking at what's going on with that weather. It's going to be a case of, is there going to be changes later on? We're expecting there might be, and so they're trying to make hay while the sun shines. Duna back down on the brakes into the final corner there of Mountford, and that's an important pass because it might be a case of Dennis Duna trying to work with Ben Scullion to make it a group of 4 at the front rather than a group of 2. Knops is really pushing. That's a 15.1 fastest lap and a must-need 15.1 fastest lap because he's trying to break Oskari Kantonen out of slipstream range.
It's not the fastest anymore. Duna with a 15.129, just a few hundredths quicker than Knops that time through. So he is pushing the 60 car, trying to chase them down. It is a gap of about 1.5 seconds up to the fin, but critically, it looks like Knops and Kantonen are no longer fighting one another, so they can really get their outright pace down now.
Yeah, and that outright pace, I think, is going to be so important for these drivers here in 1 and 2 because you've got that chance to start focusing on that. Knops and Kantonen, they want to go as far as they can before rain hits because that's what's going to change them because they're looking around at everybody else but Knops and Oskari Kantonen going, well, how long can I go before it's quicker to make the right decision out there on circuit? For Bert Knops, I think he sits down and realises that he's got a responsibility, and that responsibility is, well, just look behind. Oskari Kantonen's still there, still pushing, still within 0.6 of a second. I can't blink until he does.
Indeed, coming up into Long Bridge once more, looking for their entry up into Newry Corner. Look at how hard they're driving now. Knopp a little too hard as he goes deep into the double right-hander. Kantonen has an opportunity. Is he going to be able to take it back by the time they get to Mountford?
Well, if he wants it, he'll take it. And so now here comes the look onto the flying mile. So now you're starting to think about, well, are you too close to make this move? Look at them. They're bump drafting on this straight. There's no other way of describing it.
Not something I think many drivers were willing to do back in this day. I think Oskari knows the game here. He knows he can't battle with his rival. He's got to work together. He's got to try and keep ahead of Duna because he's getting bigger in the mirrors. He's cut down, it looks like, a second on this lap alone. We'll see what the tail of the tape is as they cross the line.
Well, that tail of the tape is that Duna here is about 1 second off of Oskari Kantanen and is now starting to really muster up some progress and really move. It looks like an issue for Riley Wyans at the final corner. He's dropped back then behind Corrali and Gardner, so he's had a moment out on track, but Duna now into 3rd position, now giving chase. It's 3 at the front of this race.
In fact, our top runners are pretty evenly matched. You have to go down to between 6th and 7th place before you get a gap that's bigger than 2.5 seconds. On board with Duna, you can see the rain coming down. It is still rather light, but it's starting to pick up a little bit from what I can see on our forecast. But that last lap, half a second faster for the bright pink 60.
And that half a second would have been all lost at the Tannery corner, up over the top, at Newry corner, where all of the issues came about. So for Knops and Kantanen, it's because they're looking at each other that it's bringing other drivers into play. And there is Dennis Duna, who is just happy to sit and try and close that margin down. Is happy to be in a place where you're turning around, you're seeing just how important it's going to be for these two to try and work together to break away. But if they have to let him in, they have to let him in. They've got really no other choice. It's a lot better this time as they go around here on lap 8:28. But they've allowed themselves more into the battle, more into the race, more pressure to be involved.
You will pay for mistakes at this circuit, especially out of the corner. What happened there? Oh, I think maybe that was just a connection.
Corrali.
Oh, okay. I thought that was a different car. And Jerry Ferry is not going to be on the podium this time for sure, as the car is facing the wrong way. Looks like he's trying to wait for an opening maybe.
Riley Wyans as well, also out of the race. So it looks like we've had a lot of drama there over the last 5 seconds or so, Joe, because we've got 2 cars out confirmed of this race and 1 pointing the wrong way.
Yeah, so Corrali, Wyans, both now official DNFs and retired from this race. This time across the line, what's the lap difference? Duna only a 10th quicker than Kantanen, so he's making up time, but it's by inches now instead.
Yeah, it's a case of you're only going to win millimetre by millimetre at this moment. Let's take a replay here of Riley Wyans and what happened here with him. So this is coming through on the river and over South S. That's right onto the racing line there for Riley Wyans, and that pretty much ends the day. It is immediate as you find it.
As soon as that wheel came off there, really wasn't driving it back home. Officially, the rules in the HRC is that you can try and repair the car, but it must be in a safe enough condition that you can limp it back without being a hazard to others. So when a wheel comes off, that usually takes away that opportunity to try and do so, unfortunately. And that's why we're seeing so many DNFs. It's such a long lap around here, you're probably not going to be able to drive the car back unless it was a small hit.
No, it's very tough when you've got yourself a lot of damage on the car, because that suspension is very, very fragile. It's good when it's working in an optimum condition, but when it doesn't, when there's any sort of buckle in it, it's a car that doesn't work. And so that's what we tend to see. Ferry's done very well to get it back to the pits, by the way, so he's done well. But out there at the front, leaders still continuing to do what they do best. Now, we're going to take another look here. This is what happened to Andres Corrali here. This is heading to the Tannery corner. So Ferry's gone off already. He's gone and clipped 1 post, 2 posts, and he wraps himself around the telegraph pole. And Corrali turns into the corner, would have been distracted by it, comes off of the exit of the corner, and we'll see what happens to Corrali here, running through the next left-hand bend over onto the river. And does he just do exactly the same? So it looks like he avoids trouble there through the left, but coming up the hill towards Newry, runs through the right and just disconnects.
Oh, connection problems. The unfortunate reality of racing on the internet. It just will happen from time to time. And even as solid as a connection as you think you have, it can suddenly blip out of existence for you. And so that's essentially what we'll often describe as sort of the internet equivalent of having a mechanical, and there's just nothing you can do to stop it. So the rain continues to come down harder and harder. We're starting to see rooster tails off these cars as Kantanen now has to deal with a lack of visibility.
Well, it's raining now, and it's raining hard, and it's happened quickly. So this now is a complete change to what they were expecting out there. The rain has come at just before the halfway stage, and it is bucketing itself down. They now have to really dial back in any form of work that they do, and know that they are just dancing to try and find a finish of this race through. And Canton, you can see, having to put full opposite lock for a long time through the exit of the corner just to get it slowed up to the way that's wanted. And again, chasing last place you want to be is stuck behind someone else's spray. And now here comes the chance to work out whether this move's going to be left or right, left or right, left or right. How about I just sit behind you?
Yep, again, just waiting patiently with that car, not wanting to battle too much so that Duna doesn't get an opportunity. Good news for fans of Corrali, since that was an internet disconnect, he is legally allowed to re-enter this race. It's not against the rules if he rejoins, but obviously his race severely compromised. Speaking of compromises, my goodness, that car all over the place for Ascari.
Yeah, sliding all about on the circuit. You don't want to be doing that too often, especially over there, that bridge, that long bridge over the South Esk River. You are certainly hoping that nothing goes wrong. Now, Tom D here, back in 10th position, looking at Martinov's full position. This would be for 9th, and these drivers just profiteering on everyone else's malaise at the moment. So every time we're looking at it, they're trying to move. And speaking of drivers who are struggling at the moment, Nico Hillebrand has now fallen behind Reece Gardner. So he's fallen back from what was 3rd earlier on in this race, now down to 7th.
Yeah, I'm looking through, and I want to say, I'm trying to remember our starting order. I think Ingars and Foreman both have gained a ton of spots in this race. Here's Tom D. This is coming down into the hotel corner, and gooses it a little bit too hard. I did see the drivers talking about how tough it is to try and get on the throttle. They were saying when the track is fully wet that they were kind of half throttle. I think they said all the way up into 4th gear.
Oh, and what's happened to Knops? Because he's now fallen out of the lead, and he's now back to 4th.
Uh-oh. He was up at the front for so much of this one. It's a bit of a shame. It looks like he's able to carry on. So whatever happened, he's gotten away with it. I wondered if this was the case. Outbraked himself. Round she goes. And Cantonen says, thank you very much. That makes life so much simpler.
It's as easy as you like. Takes the easy route back onto circuit, letting 3 cars through before putting the power back down again to continue. But it goes to show you what Bert Knopp's driving style is. In the dry, he's wrestling it about a lot. So in the rain, you can only imagine how much work he has to do on the steering wheel just to get the car pointed in the right direction. So I think Knopp's there just out thinking it. So much of Canton just happy to sit there and wait. It's just waiting for an opportunity for Bert Knops to just overcook it.
He's going to be kicking himself for that one because it's going to be difficult to make that time back up. He's 7 seconds off of the lead right now. So while he did lose time, it wasn't huge amounts, but it was enough that he may have done himself in on that one. So what about Dennis Duna? Promoted to 2nd, 1.2 seconds off the lead. Could he actually do the double today?
It's plausible. It's really plausible in this position because someone like Oskari Kantonen has pace, has the ability to go and get forward with it. But that is Austin Birchwood. That is a walk on the wild side, perhaps.
Well, the car's still running, and he's found his way back to the track. That's not the first time we've seen this at this circuit in our coverage, that drivers wind up in what is essentially the lake bed a little bit, the floodplain, and don't hit anything, but boy, it's got to be scary trying to find your way through the brush, hoping you don't accidentally run into a tree.
Yeah, that was huge in terms of where you're looking at, hoping you're trying to find the circuit once again. And when you're down in that section of the bed, knowing that you've got to try and find a way back up, you are just hoping that you are in the right place and you're not going to hit the wrong thing. So I think he's done incredibly well. He's lucky that he's not hit anything going down and that he's had the wherewithal to just slow it down and find any amount of safety to try and get back up onto the circuit. Martinov still under pressure here. Tom D trying to recover.
Bit all or nothing this track, it seems, because we've got 2 drivers that are a lap down. I guess you could say 3. Starzov is back out. He's 11 laps down, getting back out. Again, credit to Pauls for carrying on, even though he's not really looking for many high positions from here on out. But yeah, it's either you're in or you're out in this race. You're not falling down multiple laps and just trying to trundle on. The DNFs are just stacking up once again.
Yeah, and those DNFs, I think, are so important because we're seeing more of... Oh, they're both going to go. They've both looked at each other on the brakes, and they've both gone straight on.
The track is super wet at this stage. Was that Birchfield that got into him, or was that Johnson? I think it was Birchfield.
Yeah, so that actually will be Danny Fuhrman, who I think's got into them. So Fuhrman there, who is down on the field, realises suddenly I'm picking up them both, and look behind them, and I think that might just be the one lap down Martin Beyer who's joined them.
Yeah, Beyer probably not wanting to make problems with this group. He's just trying to run his own race, like you said, at a lap down. He's making up as much as he can, but he's not really going to be doing any overtakes. Yeah, you can really see just how truly wet the track is now. Is not seeing puddles, but there's a definite sheen on numerous parts of the surface.
So you just pray that you're not going to hit one of those and go sliding about. That's going to be what they're worried here. And Canton and Duna have pulled out 3.5 seconds now over Ben Scullion. So it's these two right now for the race win. And there's not much else that anybody else can do about it at this point here on lap 12. The lap times will certainly have faded in terms of their times. But for Dennis Duna, I'd like this position if I were him. I've got all the time in the world. I will have, when I cross the line, 16 laps to decide, not if I want to try and make this move on Oskari Kantonen, but when I want to make that pass.
We often describe rain as the great equalizer here in racing. It makes it changeable conditions throughout. The grip is always going to be just a little bit of a question mark. It might stabilize for a bit, but as we've seen, Knops also discovering there's going to be corners where you don't quite know how early you have to brake, and you just have to feel it out each and every time you come up to it.
Yeah, and there is Gerard Rion, who is trundling along on what I can only assume is the Tannery Straight right now. So that does not look good. In fact, no, that's on the run here over towards Longford Corner. So that is a big off there. But now look at this. Kantonen having to really be focused where Dennis Duna is placing the car right now. On the brakes they go, taking a look at the barn door in front of them, and then rounding Longford Corner, attacking off the exit. Look how much Dennis Duna is having to slide behind in the wheel tracks.
Remember, there is a lot of power compared to the weight in these cars, and when you don't have weight, that means finding the grip is even more difficult. So these things I mean, he's skipping around the track, just trying to find the grip coming over these crests. Remember, this is old school. This is not billiard smooth. These surfaces, so there's little crests, and these cars do not have wings to create downforce, so they are going to be dancing every single time you hit a bump.
Yeah, and especially when you've got puddles in the valleys that aren't bumps, it's even tougher out there. You're trying to make sure that you're keeping as much of a contact patch out on the racing circuit, and you're just looking at Dennis Duna here. He can't put the power down to anywhere near the amount that he wants to, and look at how he's having to wrestle with the car through each and every corner. This is not, I would say, comfortable conditions out there to go and race. This is one of the toughest races out there he's had to deal with. There's Bert Knopp sliding it about, now fallen down to fifth, so he's actually lost the place to Darren Andrews there. So Andrews up into fourth place, really taking advantage.
Yeah, to give you an idea, remember we said the fast laps were in the 2:15s earlier on. They're now running 2:25s at the sharp end of the field. That is how much they have been slowed down by this rain. Bert Knops, they're still giving chase, wanting to try and make up for it. I suspect that Rion is trying to limp this wounded car back for some repairs here. He's way off the pace.
Yeah, we saw him going very slowly and trying to recover that back, and give him credit, he's managing that. We saw him as the leaders went by earlier on, but Darren Andrews losing out the place now to Bert Knopp, so that brings him back into fifth position, and it's only 6 to 7 seconds then to Rhys Gardner, so that's what they're looking at here, and in fact that time really is opening up here to Rhys, so I wonder if he's just had a moment.
I'd hate to see another mistake out of Rhys on this one. I know we're always just a little bit partial because we often get to work alongside Reese. He does a lot of commentary too. Honestly, one of my favorite guys to get to work with. The most incredible dry wit of anybody I've gotten to share the mic with. But right now, he'd probably like things to be a bit dry because it looks like it is a struggle.
It's a struggle, but actually I'll go the other way. I actually think he quite likes it being wet at the moment because he was down in the mid-teens when it was dry, and now he's managed to make his way up a place, and now he's in P6.
As we watch Darren Andrews just...
change for the lead.
Oh, Duna is, good catch on that one, but it's close. It's under braking, coming down at a Tannery corner, and he's through. Dennis Duna now in the top spot. Once again, Kantonen on the back foot, as we could see a back-to-back win for the Bright Pink 60.
Well, look at the drive there going through and having to lift off as they run up now to Newry corner. Oskari Kantonen was looking to try and catch Duna in trouble, and Duna slides through, and Kantonen has to catch a little bit on his own accord, and now moving up then through the gears and trying to get any opportunity sorted back as they head on to the flying mile. Dennis Duna to the point, but Oskari Kantonen I don't think is going to let this go.
He's going to try and see if he can take this one back, although we did see him ride behind Knops for quite some time. Not interested in that in this case. He's going to try and attack immediately. He's got a nose ahead coming down into the braking from Mountford corner. But who is going to be the first to hit the apexes? He'll have the inside. He's a little bit deeper. The car struggles to stay pointed straight. He will be ahead. Duna only briefly our leader on this one.
Yeah, and that's just your first sighter of where you can make passes out there. And I think if Dennis Duna wants to win this race, he's going to have to be a little bit coy in terms of the way that he goes and makes that pass. It will be a case of, do you want to make this move into Tannery corner like you did last lap? I would say that Dennis Duna will say, go fish.
And Scullion, who was close to that front group much earlier in this race. Ooh, he's got to be careful with those tires on the apex there. I thought he was going to clip one for a brief moment. Now we're starting to see actual puddles form, but Ben has dropped off to about 4.5 seconds away from that top group. And if Bert Knops is able to recover, he's the next one behind trying to play catch up. Hillebrand here in a nice little fight with Kirsten.
Nikki Kirsten here in that 7th and 8th positions. It's Hillebrand going backwards, though, which I think is rather important to keep in mind. Hillebrand really struggling here with this rain and is falling back further and further and further. And this is just proving to be a tough race at the office for him right now, running down the hill, heading over to the viaduct.
So as we come across once again into Tannery corner, Duna right behind, laying the pressure on thick, but spins his wheels multiple times. Look at him just sawing at the wheel, trying to keep the car pointed the right direction. It has been getting wetter and wetter. In fact, I'm seeing this might be the wettest we will see the track currently. Although the rain is not as hard as it was a little bit earlier, the wetness we're seeing on the surface of the track is very, very deep now.
Yeah, and it's very much like driving on a lake, it feels at the moment for Dennis Duna and Oskari Kantonen, who lead this one outright. You can see just how much Dennis Duna is having to work through. Even the smallest left-hand bend, he's having to really fight to try and keep the car pointed in the right direction. So when you sit down at these conditions, it isn't about, well, do I battle? Do I go through? Do I get in a place? It's about surviving in these conditions. And, well, talking of surviving, we've lost Martin Beyer now out of this race. So we're down to just 14 because you got Rion in the pits and has been for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. And I believe has only just now been able to clear his pit stop and get back going again.
Glad to see him able to return. I think Starsovs is still not showing as an official retirement, although he's becoming more laps down. So I wonder if he's also taking repairs. Yeah, he's also still in the pit. So maybe he is just not, hasn't officially withdrew his entry quite yet. Big snap there for the 72. Kantonen doing everything he can to hold on to this top spot. And I have to say, this is a good recovery because look at the distance he's put between himself and Dennis now.
Yeah, look, this is the key. You start looking around, it now becomes 9/10 of a second. They've got traffic in front, and there will be ebbs and flows. And I wonder if Dennis Duna's just taking a couple of moments to fall back here in this group. Almost flying the telegraph pole on the left-hand side. He's a lucky lad. He hasn't hit that any harder than he has.
Yeah, the car gets going. Now the question is, did he do any damage to the suspension? The damage has been done to the battle. At the very least, it's up to 3 seconds because of that. So Dennis may be finding the edge, the limit here of what's possible around this track. Scullion still behind him by about 3 seconds, so not a problem there as we ride on board with Oskari Kantanen here, current leader in the race, giving us what is probably one of the few clear views in this race right now.
Yeah, this is as open plains as it gets, and the easiest you can deal with. And now Dennis Duna's fallen behind Ben Scullion into third place, so 6 seconds worth of margin. Oskari Kantanen, I think now has been given every single opportunity to win this race from this position with a 6-second margin in these wet conditions. Your nearest challenger looking for the double, making one small mistake. You now have to take this one and run with it. 7 seconds to the good now. Oskari Kantanen, this is what he's been waiting for.
Duna still holds the fastest lap of this race, but of course some of that is going to be compromised by this weather. We probably won't see fastest laps until this truly dries back up. But we know that means Dennis is quick. Scullion into second over Duna. Knops behind them by 9 seconds. And looking like he is going to have a real bit of trouble, although he could catch up to Duna, who finds these conditions disagreeable, at least for now. That's multiple mistakes we've gotten from the 60.
Yeah, errors, compound errors, compound errors. And if you're trying to go out there and really try and navigate through these and you do make a mistake, you're always trying to drive harder to try and make up for what's gone wrong, and so that allows more mistakes to creep into your driving, and that's where it's going wrong for Dennis Duna now. He needs a couple laps to just sit back, take this scenario out there, and then go on and look at the final 12 laps of this race in a much different light. Andrew still keeping Bernd Knops there, very much honest in this race, but at this stage these drivers could be on the cards for a podium, but they would be relying on more mistakes from Dennis Duna.
I'm seeing 0% rain right now on our weather, so it looks to have stopped for the time being, but it'll take a while for that track to dry out. You can still see these rooster tails being kicked up, and probably will for at least a little while, but that racing line should start to clear up as time goes by, and the drivers will be able to pick up the pace once again. Reese Gardner all the way up to 6th now at this stage, and let's see, how far does he have to go? 15 seconds.
Bye-bye.
So
Right-hand side, one of the green cars there behind, there was a lap down. I think it was Jerry Ferry going straight on, and I think he was heading back to town.
It unfortunately was another spot where you've got a bit of runoff to save you if you do need to escape. But yeah, that was not for position. I was about to say Reese kind of on his lonesome, 15 seconds to Darren Andrews up in front of him, and about 11 seconds back to Nicholas Kirsten. But in this sort of racing with a changeable track conditions to deal with, Reese no doubt is happy to simply focus on what's in front of him rather than battling another car.
Well, it's a lot easier when you're out there on your own rather than you got people around you, and I think that's what he's probably banking on at this moment, that there isn't really anybody to threaten his race. He's just going out there dealing with what he needs to. The longer that this race goes on, the more likely it's going to fall into his hands. He's relying on the cars in front to run into troubles, but they're all pretty gapped out at the moment, between 6 seconds to 5 seconds each between them here through the front four, and it's about 2.5 to Darren Andrews. So there's a lot to work with. Nicholas Hillebrand now behind Nicholas Kirsten, so he's even losing the Nico battle out there, the Nicholas battle right now, and it means that down in 8th place, it's about 25 seconds to Tom D. He'll be hoping for a little bit of a drier spell with the circuit trying to evaporate.
It does look like it's getting clearer and clearer. Yeah, we're starting to see more sun up above as well, so that's going to help to dry it up even faster. Could we get to dry conditions before the checkered flag in this one. There's still 11 laps left to go. Nico Hillebrand, another one of those that I suspect is just simply happy to get farther into this race compared to last time. Here's Kirsten, also dealing with, I think, some lap traffic. So that is not Reese Gardner that Nicholas is going by. So just another car done. We've seen quite a bit of separation, actually, as I'm looking through our timing tower right now. This weather has unfortunately hurt a number of our battles.
It has. It's definitely opened out the field, but this is what it was like back in the day. The rain definitely made a big difference to these races, and it wasn't uncommon, Joe, to see gaps out there of 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds, a whole lap in some cases in terms of races. So I don't see this as a negative out there in terms of how they've been racing. This is just the style of racing, and Hillebrand's out.
Oh, Hillebrand, unfortunately, going to be the latest. That's commentator's curse, because I just said he's glad to be in this race. I'm sorry, Nikki. It just wasn't how it was supposed to go. So as we see Martinov's still on the lead lap, actually, about almost 2 minutes behind at this stage, but chugging away. He's going to get promoted into the top 10 now that Hillebrand is out.
Oh, you take that, jumping into the top 10 and making that movement with Fuhrman and co there. So this is what happened to Hillebrand. This is looking like it's coming down into the viaduct. He gets a massive wiggle of oversteer. He clips the inside I think he's just come off the post there, or even across the rocks, and he has gone straight into the foliage on the left-hand side. Very similar to what happened to Nicholas Kirsten in race 1.
No chance to save it, unfortunately. Back to Tom D, who also finds himself in the top 10. Martinov's actually even promoted up to 9th. So yeah, a number of drivers really working their way upwards. Tom D having some fun out there with a big slide coming past the hotel and across the train tracks once again. How many can he make up? Because he's only actually 2 seconds off of Martinov's.
Yeah, so those 2 seconds here for Tom D, he'll be looking around and thinking, well, this is great. He's had a couple moments in this race. He was at one point very close to the likes of Nicholas Kirsten and co. So he's got work to do here to get to Martinov's. But look at how much time he's actually back in the long context of this race, because you've got the likes of Danny Fuhrman, who's almost a minute off of Nicholas Kirsten, 7th to 8th. So this group is probably looking behind them, and very soon is going to be looking at the lapping process.
Watching Burfield come around and also fly down the tannery straight as he picks up speed once again. So let's see, are we already up to how many DNFs we had last time? We're more laps than we had last time, and I think we're about even to where we were before at this stage, and yet we still have a number of laps left to go. Jerry Ferry is back out. Now, I thought did he DNF, or is he back out there?
No, I think he was able to keep it going and keep himself running. So he had a moment. I think he went back to pits and then was able to continue on in the race as Gerard Rion, another driver who fell through the same thing, is going to be very careful of the grass on the outside of Tannery Corner there, because that can very easily be the end of your race if you just put a tyre wrong on the grass, because you don't have as much grip on the grass as you do out there on the asphalt that you've got on track. So when you're dealing with that, and the reason why you say don't go on the grass is because you get a different change in wheel speeds between your left-hand side wheels and your right-hand side wheels, and because of that, that's why the car wants to snap over a direction each and every time you get it wrong.
A little bit of those tires once again for Dennis Duna. Has recovered back to 3rd. Knops has not been able to overtake, but it's actually about 1.5 seconds off of Ben Scullion. So the pace is there. The car is looking quick. In fact, last lap, if this is right, Scullion may have made a mistake himself. It was 3 seconds faster for Dennis.
Well, D's out.
That time by.
So Tom D, who was chasing down Martinov's, is now out of the race, and Duna very nearly finding the viaduct there, going through. So he's definitely sliding about. But Tom D now out, Joe. That's not going to be great for his news, as he was running in 10th.
More positions automatically gained by a few drivers Birchfield will get in the top 10. Jerry Ferry, who is a lap down, and yes, apologies, I forgot that he had kind of knocked himself into that telegraph pole there, as here's what took out Tom D down into the viaduct, and unfortunately unable to stop it before it takes a massive hit, and the car is too damaged to carry on.
Yeah, backing it into the hay bale bundles there over on the right-hand side, left-hand side as he was making his way over, and that just goes to show once again why this is tough, because these drivers know that the track is drying out there at the moment, and so they're feeling like they can take more risks, but there's certain areas of the circuit where right now you just can't.
Yeah, we're getting down closer to the previous times, but not quite. Looking at 220s for the quick cars currently. Interestingly, it does look like third, fourth, all even sixth place, all quicker than Oskari Kantanen, who ran a 222 last time. So the Finn may be just trying to manage the gap at this stage, but he can't dilly-dally for too long.
No, he definitely can't dilly-dally, because this is going to be one of the tougher scenarios that he's got in this race, knowing that this track is drying, knowing that he's going to want to go and be a little bit more aggressive out there. You know, you sit down and look at what Oskari Kantanen's built. He's built a great margin by being the most consistent in the rain. Now, it doesn't help there that Ben Scullion runs off the road through the final corner, and now will open up a big opportunity for Dennis Duna to now go and get second. But Dennis Duna's got the biggest threat in the drive, because we've seen what pace he's got. Kantanen still has to be switched on here.
Cannot afford to make mistakes. So far, so good. And to be fair, I mean, it is a Finn in the rain. We often will talk about how Finns, with their driving standards, the tests that they have to take just to get their driver's license, kind of have almost an unfair advantage compared to a lot of other nationalities with their experience. So these conditions probably suit Oskari just fine.
Yeah, I think they definitely suit Oskari Kantanen. I think that Finnish drivers are one of the few nationalities out there that you do naturally expect just to be fantastic in all conditions, because each and every time you see it, they do. I mean, just look at the World Rally Championship. There's always a driver from Finland who's up there or close. If it's Tommi Mäkinen, if it's Mikko Hirvonen, if it's Marcus Gronholm, you just know that there is a lot of racing pedigree that comes from Finland out there, and that region that gives so much ability to how you go out and drive. Dennis Duna continuing to close down the gap, staying right underneath a much more conservative line there, going through Tannery, a lot less tail kick going through. Steve still dealing with a couple damp patches out on the circuit, but Duna knows that the long bridge isn't the place to make the move, and neither is Nuri, so he's happy just to sit back here and wait for that chance to go on the exit here. And this is why he's waited and waited, because now with that slide from Scullion, here comes the chance.
Smooth is fast, and Dennis is showing that to great effect here. A little bit of a kink to the left-hand side. They're going to have to give each other space going through, but it seems the speed is on the side of Dennis Duna as they look for the brake marker. This is where Dennis had it kind of unravel, honestly, a little bit earlier. Big off that cost him the lead of the race and even second position. Will Scullion fight back down the inside? Under braking? No, he cannot. So P2 for Dennis. 10 seconds to make up. Oh, no, it's the Achilles heel, I think we have figured out, is Mountford Corner for Dennis Duna.
Yeah, they both made mistakes there, but this time Dennis Duna with a stronger one, having to just outbrake it by, I would only say, about 5 meters. He did very well to get that turned around and still back onto the power and attacking again. But really, I would say one of the toughest moments of his race there for Dennis Duna, and he knows how important it is to get back to second and prove it. And again, diving down the hill to the viaduct, the lowest point on the circuit, there is really a sense that Dennis Duna's got the pace, but I think he's overdriving.
You can see with all the trees and shade around, it's leaving a lot more moisture on the track where the sun is not drying it up as quickly. Duna's still got more chances to try and take P2, but the longer this goes on, the less likely we're going to see him be able to try and catch and pass for 2 wins in one day.
Well, if he wants 2 wins in one day, he's going to need a lot of help to do it right now, because Cantonen's gap looks almost insurmountable at the moment. So we will soon see whether that is going to work for him. But the first thing he's got to do before even thinking about Cantonen is, how do you get past Scullion right now with just 12 runners out on the circuit? I suppose it's going to be a little bit easier navigating through any troubles they've got. But Dennis Duna, every time he gets close, Scullion just seems to find an exit.
Yeah, and I mean, that's the critical part on a track like this, where it's all these long straightaways. You want to be solid coming off the corner. I mean, we saw what gave Dennis the opportunity was a big slide right here just a bit ago for Ben. That time, it was a lot more clean coming through the double right-hander. And as the sim racing for Holland driver watches, he sees that red car get a little smaller in the distance.
Yeah, so he's going to have to find a way to get that a little bit more enlarged in the distance, as he now closes in behind, follows his every single wheel track out there, trying to gain as much time as possible along this straight. 0.3 of a second down to 0.2, and now he's starting to gain that advantage. Now he's starting to close it down to 1.5. But as he hits the braking zone, he needed an extra 150 meters, I felt, if he wanted to go and make that move, because he got that pretty dialed in through the final part of that straight, but still can't quite manage it. But you know, this is not bad. I think he's looking at this going, well, if this is going to be my race, then this is the one where I'm going to have to try and just figure out when is the right place, when is the right time to go and make that happen. And I would say that for Dennis Duna, it's just a patience game now from this point onwards.
Well, it might require some patience, because we've been seeing glimpses of, I think that's Martinov's in front of them. I wonder if he could use the lap traffic as a bit of a pick if they catch him at the right time. A little bit harder with so many long straightaways at this circuit, but certainly, and it is Martinov's, there's the confirmation. Depending on when they come up to this red and white machine, he could be a chance.
Well, this is an all-important chance right now to get through. And Ingars Martinovs, I think, with the lap traffic we've seen today, is certainly looking at trying to stay away. But Scullion and Duna, I don't think, have as much luxury as we think they do, because you got Nops there, sat at just 2.2 seconds behind. He's been quietly making the time up.
Yeah, that's a good point. We've forgotten how fast he is. He was leading this race earlier on. He was the fastest in qualifying, so surely the speed is there. Last time by, 2:18.1. Duna, 2:19.8. He is gathering them up hand over fist.
Yeah, he really is now, and this is where you're starting to look around and go, is this the pick for these drivers, or is this the pick for Nops to jump onto the back? Martinov's pretty much having to wrangle about. Jerry Ferry, by the way, is back in the pit, so something's happened to him out on track. But Dennis Duna looking around at Ben Scullion. Scullion has got himself just enough, I think, to hold this back, but Duna now at 1.5, I think, might have a chance of making this move. Moves over left-hand side of the Flying Mile, moves through on circuit, and I think it's going to get a 10th clear here and get the pass he wants. Now you start thinking about this and going, well, he needed to make that move, because if Nops is in the background, we know Nops was the pole sitter. So Dennis Duna knows there's a lot of pace that he needs to be working with here, and moving to second certainly helps.
Nice pass down. Oh, and a Mountford, big moment behind them from Martinovs. I think he kept it from becoming an accident there. Jerry Ferry, another driver with problems at the inside. Yes, indeed. This time, though, instead of the other bridge, it was at Long, and that may have been day over. Left a bit of debris in the middle of the track, which seems Kirsten has run over. Hopefully that didn't damage Kirsten's car.
Well, it doesn't look like it's done too much to Nicholas Kier. Oh, Kirsten's out.
Well, it did something, apparently, although we don't know that that's related in the end. That's just a bit of a shame. Nicholas was having a good one this time, all the way up to 7th position. Big slide there from Duna coming out of Hotel Corner. So Kirsten, it wasn't related. It doesn't look like, because that was just a massive tank slapper down into Long Bridge.
That's a hefty shunt. And there's no other way of describing that, because the amount of energy that was dissipated from that hit, it was very much a case of just running into one of those struts of the bridge. And I tell you what, it's amazing how strongly they've reinforced those bits of wood there that they got through, because on any other day, you'd probably see about 4 or 5 or maybe 10 drivers would find themselves somewhere in the South Esk River right now. But that is just a case of how hard they're pushing. It's very good that here in rFactor 2, they've reinforced it with steel or something.
Yeah, exactly. Just a little bit of an advantage of racing in the sim. Kantonen, still our leader. 11 seconds now over Duna. Dennis having to tussle with Ben for so many laps has cost them time. And this time across the line, which is going to be in about a corner, we are going to be down to 4 laps to go.
Yeah, and those 4 laps are going to be all about just consolidation here for Oskari Kantonen. I think he looks around at this and realizes that the group behind are focusing on themselves, and he doesn't have to worry too much about what he's been able to do. He staved off the challenge as the dry went to wet, and then he built the advantage as the wet went to dry and the mistakes came out. So I think Oskari Kantonen's driven this one faultlessly as Bert Knops there sits on the back. And this is an agonising gap here for Bert Knops, because he's there at 1.8 seconds here off of Ben Scullion. He's just not close enough to do anything, but he's still there as a threat.
He was about 3/10 slower that last time by as well. So yeah, he's still having to play catch up, and he's going to need maybe a bit more speed if he wants to get a couple positions. I'd say second place is still possible. It's going to be difficult, though. He's going to have to hustle from here on out. You mentioned earlier, though, Jake, about how this looks very much like how the races were back then, where cars would get quite separated. It wasn't as much wheel-to-wheel battling as we tend to try and appreciate today. It was very much a chess game. Also, on top of that, we have the attrition very similar to how it used to be, where many cars wouldn't necessarily see the checkered flag. I think we're on course for about only 11 getting to the finish today.
At the moment we are, but of course there could be still more twists in the tail in the final 4 laps worth of racing. I think that much does have to be remembered. So I think there's still a long way to go, and this is one of the tougher battles that we have seen over the course of the last few laps or so. And if these drivers come together, there's a real chance for drivers like Andrews, for example, and Gardner to pick up the pieces of what has gone on here. But right now, Ben Scullion, he's just trying to stay in range of Dennis Duna, who's proving that in the dry, he is one of the toughest characters to go and try and navigate through. And again, Scullion just running on the limit of grit that they could possibly find before they have to fully commit with a full lock of oversteer.
It seems like they're still pushing hard, especially because I'm sure they see Bert Knops and they know, oh God, this guy's fast. I cannot wait around. I got to go hard here at the finish of this race if I want to consolidate this position. There is no just puttering to the checkered flag. The good news is, at least for Knops, there's nobody else behind him that's close. Andrews is about 9 seconds back, so he's not even visible in the mirror. Oh, well, Knops is going to take himself out of it as he outbreaks down into Mountford again.
Yeah, and that's the issue that you got. You got to start doing something when it's late on in the race. You can't just rely on everyone else's mistakes. You got to go and make something happen. So, I'm sitting down and looking at this and going, you know what? There is not much more that can be said. It's sit down, make sure you're counted, and this hasn't worked out for him. He drops back that time, and I think he condemns himself to 4th.
Wow. Real stunner. I mean, today was almost a game of who makes the least mistakes out there. And I'd say you could easily argue that Kantonen is that driver, having just, I wouldn't say run a flawless race, but while everybody else around him has faltered, he's just been chugging along, knocking the laps off.
Yeah, every single lap that he continues to try and navigate through, he realizes there are chances and he could really take advantage of those chances, and that's what he's done. He was all the way back down, remember, in 16th on the starting grid, so he's just picked them off one at a time. He's P6 right now, and I think he takes that after a result like this, especially with how late it is in Perth right now, that he'll be knocking on the doors of the early hours of the morning in the next couple of moments. So I think he's done a fantastic job.
So we watch Danny Foreman running 7th here. About, so looks like, whew, if this is right, he's 87 seconds off of Reese Gardner in 6th place. He's the next car to be lapped if Kantonen can catch him in time, which might be possible. I don't see him in the background, but it does. Okay, yeah, so he's about 20 seconds away from catching up to him. Might be a little bit too big of an ask in these few laps. So Foreman going to be the last one to complete the entire distance of the race, as long as he can bring it home from here. And we're still getting tiny bits of spray. It hasn't completely dried up.
No, it's not fully dry, and I think that's a really important thing to remember here. Because it's not fully dry, they're still having to be a little bit trepidatious around this track, and especially down here. It's one of the final stage they look. So now you got Martinovs, who is there in 8th place. He's had a very nice run here today, hasn't he? He's just kept it out of trouble here in this race too. Got himself involved in race 1 and had to navigate his way back, but Ingars Martinovs, I think, has had a very underrated drive today, and that 8th place is just a culmination of how well he's kept out of trouble.
I agree. I completely agree. Martinovs deserves all the kudos for this race. He's kept it on the black stuff. He's kept it pointed forward, and he is going to be rewarded with a nice top 10 because of it. Birchfield's behind him, has had a few troubles here and there, but also will finish within the top 10, albeit a lap down. Probably could have been a bit more, I think, on the table for the Sebring International driver. Curious if he actually does hail from Sebring. I'm going to be heading there in less than a week's time myself.
Yes, and that always gives you a massive sense of pride when you can go out. Oh, yeah, that was a big uh-oh going through. Now, has that gone entirely the way that we want to see that there running down the hill? I'm not quite sure what the end result of that is, but it looks like it's just been okay.
Yeah, I hope we'll check back in on him at some point, but it did look like he was heading off to the runoff. There was a lot of tire smoke as he locked him up, and then definitely was heading to at least the grass at the very least. So Gerard Rion locking up as well. Is he going to make the corner? Yeah, he's going to make that nice and easy. All those hail bales there to help keep the cars from running off down into the river or into the pylons of that viaduct.
Yeah, and so when you got these drivers turning around and saying they don't want to be involved in any form of drama out there, those hay bales, you stare at them and you don't want them to stare back and say, no, this is your drama now, you go and deal with it. But speaking of no dramas, heading on towards the final lap of this race, Oskari Kantonen, 11 seconds clear at the front, has navigated through all of the trouble. And now you start wondering what could have been for him in that race 1, because he was very bottled up throughout the majority of that opening race. Couldn't find himself a way through, and when he did, he was involved in a lot of scrapping about. When he's on his own, look at the way he's driving. It's faultless, it's calm, it's everything that you want it to be. I just think he got caught up in that opening race in the wrong place at the wrong time, and it really cost him the reality of his race. And Jerry Ferry on the final lap has just found retirement.
Oh, not going to be able to get to the checkered flag, it looks like, for Ferry. So from a podium to a bit of a disappointing day, no doubt. And you talked about calm for Oskari. I mean, I have to fully agree. I thought he looked like maybe he was just taking it easy off of the final corner there and wasn't going very fast. But he's running 16.4. For comparison, Duna is 16.5, Skulian a 16.1. So yeah, no, Oskari is still going plenty fast out there in comparison to everybody else. So he's not resting on his laurels.
No, I don't think he is resting on his laurels. And you can't rest on your laurels out there in a race like this, because the moment that you start taking off pace out there on this track, you start actually losing the ability to turn through the corners. You start losing that ability to sit down and get exactly what you want. So I think that it is really tough to manage that. And Dennis Duna, I don't think he's 100% safe yet. He just needs a good launch here over the river.
Yeah, he needs to try and keep it tidy all the way home from here. To bring a second place at the very least, which is easier said than done, it looks like. Yeah, I feel like the big example everybody likes to tout about don't back off is with Senna at Monaco, the year that the one got away from him and just could not manage to take the win after he took it into the wall with a massive lead over everybody else. But Kantonen looks like he wouldn't suffer from that here today. Like we said, it's been nice and smooth from the Finn, and he's dealt with drivers challenging him for the lead, taking the lead temporarily from him numerous times in this race. But with a nice and easy final turn around Mountford, it is going to be victory for Oskari Kantonen here today in Tasmania.
Simply put, an excellent victory out there. He did ease off coming over towards the line. Dennis Duna will get a well-deserved second place out of it, and then Ben Scullion will take the final spot on the podium. That is a fantastic result to see there going through. It'll be Knops in fourth, and Darren Andrews, you haven't really seen much of him since the early phases of the race, but a P5 there, take that all day.
Absolutely. It was a well-run race. And Reese Gardner, I mean, my goodness, how high up the field did he climb? Because sixth place is no mean feat. If he hadn't been battling earlier, maybe there could have been more for him, as he certainly climbed a number of spots. This is Foreman, who will indeed, as we said earlier, be the last on the lead lap.
Yep, so that will be the last driver to reach, and he's a fair ways away at the moment because he got very close to being lapped down in this one. So now he's only going through the Tannery corner, so he's up at the top half of the circuit trying to get back. But, you know, you sit down and say, well, what's been the key to getting the great race results that we've seen from these drivers? I think it's actually been one of the most telling things out there to say, well, the issue that it's caught all of them out is just keeping it out of trouble. You're on a tightrope 28 times in a row. You're bound not to do it the same 28 times in a row. Just make sure that you don't do it wrong one time.
Yep. So he finishes that one up, and we're going to go through our finishing order for today, at least the podium, as Kantonen, your winner. Duna, so close to back-to-back wins in the sprint in the feature today. Ben Scullion, I think, deserves a little bit of credit there, too, taking a third place after a really good run for, I think it was fifth last time out in the sprint race for him. So it looks like as we wait for the last of our drivers to cross the line to get our full results for this one. What a race we had. What two races we had, Jake. I mean, this was full of excitement.
It really was. And the reason why is because these drivers all knew how aggressive they needed to be over the course of the races. I think it was a little bit different between the two that we had, but it all settled down to the battles for the lead or the battles for the places that we saw. There wasn't going to be that much relentlessness in what they did. What broke the field apart were the mistakes that we saw here today. And as we do get the confirmation of result, it's a day that you look at and say, well, the drivers who are up at the top just so happen to be the drivers who have made the least mistakes over the race.
Yep, the cream rises to the top, as it was Kantonen today with the victory. Duna in second and Scullion in third, as we mentioned. Knops in fourth, could have taken a win, with Andrews coming home with a quiet top five, and Reese Gardner fighting hard his way through to sixth. Foreman, last one on the lead lap in seventh. And then we've only got Martinovs in eighth and Birchfield in ninth. From there, everybody else that you're going to see on your screen are DNFs. So it was a very, very hard one for a number of drivers, but not for Oskari Kantonen, who looks like he's ready to chat with us for today's win. Oskari, congratulations. You had some drivers fighting you for it, but you managed to hold them off. What's the secret here?
Thank you very much. Well, I think my secret was trying to stay behind the number one guy first, but then he made a mistake, so I had to take the lead. And then when the rain came, I just tried to save the rear tires as much as possible because they were slipping like crazy all the time.
We sometimes, bring it up that it's a cliche that Finns are always great in these mixable conditions because of what you guys have to drive with just on normal roads. Did you feel comfortable out on the wet today?
Yeah, it was all right because I was trying to be as smooth as possible to save the tires. So I wasn't pushing, like gritting my teeth and pushing, just trying to nurse the car.
Well, again, congratulations on the win. It was an impressive drive here in the feature.
Thanks.
Oskari Kantonen, your winner here today, which is going to wrap us up. A big thank you to the organizers of today's event, as well as to the team today, Jake, Daniel, and Christian. I can't thank you enough, Jake. It was a real joy to have you on board.
No, it's a real joy to be here, and I think that the joy was the racing that we've had, and there's a reason why this classics community does so well here in rFactor 2, and we get a consistent flow of drivers. It's because it creates fantastic racing. It creates challenging racing for drivers to go out there and battle with, and the reality of the situation is you want to go out there and race with like-minded people to give you the best experience of racing possible. There aren't many leagues in the world that do it better than HSRC.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us as well. And until next time, race clean, race hard. We'll see you on the track.